Welcome to NBA Deeper Dive right here at Awesemo.com as we're here to get you ready for tonight's NBA slate. Of course, start lining up those questions in chat as we are here with, hold on a second, my iPad decided to pick up but Terry McBride up here I'll kind of change some things over there to you. So Terry, how's things going, man?
Doing pretty good, man. Doing pretty good. It's been a fun weekend. A lot of college basketball, like I was telling you before. I did a couple of my fantasy baseball drafts this weekend. So like my big old school keeper league drafted this weekend. So good to get back in the swing of that. And psyched to talk about the basketball slate. I think it's going to be an interesting day of daily fantasy basketball, whatever we call this thing.
Well, that's good. It tried to my AirPods tried to go over to the iPad. Now I'm back. Now I can hear. I'm sure you said something really great right there. I'm sure you did.
Yeah, I was talking about just a good weekend, a little bit of college basketball, and a couple of fantasy baseball drafts. My big keeper league that we've been doing for 20 some odd years had its draft this weekend. So we included EMac. He took over a team in that league this year starting. So he did his first draft of that league and had a lot of fun on Zoom yesterday morning doing that. So it was good to get back in the swing of that. But ready to dive into this NBA slate. I think it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, we got a 6-game slate here tonight. We got a game that's got a over-under number of 248. We'll talk about that here in a moment. Of course, we are sponsored by No House Advantage. Of course, they're taking a different spin with player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, and so much more for cash prizes. Download the No House Advantage app today and use the promo code Awesemo to receive a first match deposit up to $20. Beat your friends, not the house. Of course, you can check out all the stuff we have over there at Awesemo.com for No House Advantage. Those player props is something I'm looking at on a daily as I'm trying to figure out where I want to go in terms of let's get right into it, Terry. It is the Wizards and the Nets. I pulled it up from January 31st, 149-146 Wizards, where the Wizards scored 48 points in the fourth quarter. I think we all kind of remember as the final minute as they steal the ball and ultimately get the win there. I mean, and obviously when we look at the Nets side of the equation, I did want to start with Blake Griffin. First game with the Nets, minutes restriction, but I just don't know how you get to him.
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult. And, we were talking about it before coming on the air, and you made a great point that, it's more likely than not that he's not going to be brought into this team for his offensive prowess by any means. And for the season across all situations in Detroit before coming here, he was at a 0.8 fantasy point per minute mark. He was 0.92 last year across all situations, healthier year, more, involved in what was going on. But still, I mean, he has just been down and trending downward throughout the season. We're integrating him into a new team. We're putting him alongside two just usage monsters in Harden and Kyrie Irving. I just don't see it for him. And 5,100 on FanDuel, 5,000 on DraftKings. He's coming up in the optimal lineup on DK a little bit because you get some flexibility between power forward and center on our boom bust tool. So he's a little interesting, I guess, from that regard. But for me, it's kind of a big ask at the prices we've got him at and with the minutes limitation. I don't see him really getting to some of these marks. So I'm curious to see as we approach lock whether that comes down some in our next version of these simulations, or whether there's just enough utility at that 5,000 price on DraftKings where just being able to move him around the board keeps him somewhat optimal. He's more a DFS play for sure than I would think in terms of any like NBA viability at this point as far as scoring real life points. But I guess maybe Alex is saying it where he might do enough fantasy scoring wise between rebounds and maybe make a couple shots that he might have the ability to get there. I didn't see it coming that way from my perspective. And just thinking about what's going to be going on the floor, I think it's a tough ask.
Yeah, I mentioned I think he's brought in this team more for defense and 3-point shooting. I mean, we've kind of joked about the Nets all year long when it comes to their defense, but this is going to be a high scoring game. You look at the over under in this one. When we look at the Wizards, obviously it all starts with Westbrook and Bradley Beal and where you want to go there. Bradley Beal 9,300 on DK. I like that price point.
Yeah, I love getting to Bradley Beal as often as I can. Leading the league in scoring comes up tremendously optimal in our simulations for both sites today. So we're going to have a bunch of them on both. The public's going to be there, but he and Westbrook, like you said, are essentially just sharing the majority of the offense on this team. They're somewhere in like the 65% usage range between the two of them. He's at 1.33 fantasy points per minute across all situations this year. Just a ton of upside in a game that is projected for around 20 points more than the next highest game in Vegas. That 248 total, the next highest game is the last game of the night with the last I saw, like a 227 or somewhere around there. So this is the game bonanza for fantasy points. Getting one of the best scorers in the league in that game, I think it just makes a tremendous amount of sense. The public's going to be there right around where he's coming up in the optimal lineup rate in our boom bust tool, but I think it makes sense to push past that mark and get as much Beal as you can.
Yeah, when you look at the ownership on the other side with James Harden, that's where everyone's going to go to. We all know what James Harden can go at, but if Kyrie Irving, about half of what the ownership is in terms of James Harden. How are you kind of developing of how you want your exposures in terms of those two guys?
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. You have the positional flex on FanDuel where you get Kyrie as a point guard, Harden as a shooting guard. Harden is a point guard only option on DK for 10-9. So that limits his optimal lineup rate, and he's going a little bit overexposed where as a shooting guard on FanDuel, that position is just pretty flat today. So he really stands out on the FanDuel slate as being kind of the go-to option despite over 40% ownership. But that said, you can roster him alongside Kyrie if you wanted to, and if you can figure out a way to pay for it, you're paying a significant amount of money to do it, but you could theoretically do that. They're both coming up very optimal, so I don't dislike either one. Harden 1.40 fantasy point per minute rate across all situations this year. In 807 minutes since joining the Nets without Durant, it's actually a 1.37 mark. He and Kyrie share the ball a little bit there, and Kyrie is on this list somewhere, I think, unless I accidentally, there he is. I was going to say, unless I accidentally left him out of this article. So with Kevin Durant out, Kyrie is at 1.25. So they're both a little bit below their seasonal marks, but some of that is just caught up in the wash. So I think they'll both be excellent options tonight. So we can get to both of them in pretty dramatic shares. Kyrie's ownership at only 15% on DraftKings is a little interesting, especially with the ability to move him between both guard positions. So I think there's some utility there.
Yeah, the other guy on the Nets that's getting the ownership is Joe Harris, who, I mean, look, we know when Joe's got that three-pointer going, he's got the potential to put up 20-plus points. And that's the guy that you point to in terms of it. Jeff Green, game time decision. I did see a little earlier. He is a go for this one. So, that's good. To me, that's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out with the Nets with Jeff Green and Blake Griffin. I think when we get to crunch time, Jeff Green will ultimately be the guy that's in the game. But I do love me some Joe Harris just because when he's shooting that rock, he has that potential of going to 23-ish points, and he's actually getting a little more ownership than Kyrie.
Yeah, and he's super interesting, right? And it's all about that shooting. It's all about his ability to catch and shoot and just get a shot off and make it. He is third in the league in true shooting percentage, 68.9% true shooting percentage, makes 48.8% of his threes, just a killer. So yeah, I like getting to him, and he does all that on only 15.6% of the usage for this team. So he's just an excellent, efficient scorer when his shot is going down. Can just take get in the corner, get the ball from Harden, from Irving, and make his shot. That's how he produces, though. He's got a 12.5% rebounding percentage and a 9.6% assist percentage. So he's not pulling down a lot of rebounds. He's not assisting on a lot of other buckets. Doesn't do a ton in terms of stocks or anything like that. So you need that shot to be falling. That said, 0.74 fantasy points per minute Doesn't look like an eye-popping number, but for a guy who does it all through shooting, that's pretty solid. And I think the price is right on this slate where he mixes in pretty well. I like him at 4,500 on FanDuel, in particular at that small forward position. Another spot that's a little bit flat today. So for 5,200, he's around maybe a third less optimal site to site, just because he's more expensive on DK, but he does pick up the flexibility between guard and forward, which I like a lot, just because you can roster him at like 5 different spots when they gave him that eligibility.
Now, when we look at the supporting cast for the Wizards, no Davis Bertans, he is out for this game. So how are you evaluating where else to go in terms of the Wizards? Because this is going to be a high scoring game.
Yeah, I think Rui is pretty interesting. Rui Hachimura, 4,900 on FanDuel keeps him very involved in the small forward conversation over there. He's less relevant on DK because he costs 5,800 against their lower cap. That's a big price increase from site to site. And you get him as a power forward center option over there where there are just kind of more plays to work with. I think he's still very much in play. He is coming up a little bit in our optimal lineup rates. And he is a productive player in this situation when he sees some minutes. So I think we can get to him. Let me see what I have in the notes here. So he's 0.78 fantasy points per minute. But we've seen him come up with a decent game when he's filling in, when he's getting a little bit of extra attention, a little bit of extra run. Doesn't need to do a lot at that salary. So I think he's relevant. And then we're getting into, some of the value play level guys, like Alex Len kind of gains a little bit of interest because he costs 3,700 on the DraftKings slate, dead minimum 3,500 on FanDuel. But I don't know that I want to go to Alex Len very frequently, despite the intense value that he could create at the singular center spot on FanDuel. I think he's got more utility for us where we can roster him alongside another center as just a regular type value play on DraftKings. But he doesn't really jump off the page on either site. He's kind of a also ran value option. Garrison Matthews, I mentioned as a potential source of, maybe a little bit of value on this slate, although it looks like he's come down since I wrote that. The price is what's driving that again. Min price on FanDuel, 3,400 on DK. Similar story with Raul Neto, 3,500 again on FanDuel. So you've got a lot of these guys that just kind of slot in and create a tiny modicum of value just by virtue of being min priced in such a highly projected scoring game. So there are going to be a ton of fantasy points. These guys are all really cheap. It's just being able to bullseye it with that dart throw on which one of these guys is going to do it for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a high scoring game. I mean, you just look at the over-unders, for all of tonight, 248, the next highest is 228.5, and then everyone else is under 218 points. So this is going to be a high scoring game that I think we got to find the value somewhere in this game of who's going to be there. But of course, if you ever do miss any of our shows, you miss the strategy show, you miss the Slate Starter podcast, you can check it about a part of the Awesemo Podcast Network. Leave a 5-star rating and review on one of our podcast channels with your Twitter handle or email address. You'll be eligible to win a free week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. One winner will be awarded every Friday, and reviews will be eligible to 1 year. Good luck, of course. One of the things that I always like to be on the Awesemo Podcast Network as I'm going around town, listening to shows. Great way to check out shows. We are unable to watch it here live on YouTube. Move on next. We got Toronto and Cleveland. Toronto, a 7.5 point favorite. Over under number in this one is 217. Start off on the Raptors. What sticks out to you about the Raptors when it comes to, say Lowry and Fred VanVleet?
That they're all going to be here and that they're all going to be healthy and on the court and sharing time, which we talk about it with this team a lot. That creates the situation where they're very productive and they're a good unit playing together for real life basketball purposes, particularly when they add OG Anunoby back into the equation, which they've done. But they all cannibalize one another in terms of fantasy point production to some degree. They all have decent rates, but none of them really pop like some of them do when others are off the court. Like you take Siakam out of the equation or you take VanVleet out of the equation, the other two guys bounce up in their production a little bit. So with everybody out there, it becomes a game of trying to either bullseye it by salary and ownership, which is also another way of saying by the leverage scores, or just taking stabs at, all right, I think this guy's got the most upside regardless of what his salary is. This is my highest raw projected guy. I like doing it by the salary and leverage approach. So they're all relatively flat, but I think the most interesting guy on the DraftKings slate is Pascal Sayakam at 7,200, where you get him as a power forward and a center. It's got some utility there. I think you can move him around the board to enough of a degree at relatively low ownership that he becomes pretty relevant. He's a 1.11 fantasy point producer across all situations this year. I think we can squeeze a little bit more than that out of him for that salary. There's a good amount of upside on him. So we can go to that. And then jumping across to the FanDuel side of things, we've got both guards at 8,200, and then you get Siakam at 79. So that puts them all really relatively flat compared to one another. The guy who bounces a little bit is OG, 5,200 at the small forward spot, where we need to extract some value tonight, coming up a decent amount of the optimal lineups, and is a productive player. He's him. Wait, just searching for the letters OG is not going to get us there. Well, he's a productive player, 0.86 fantasy points per minute. I can't get to that note that I had made. So he's in play on the FanDuel slate. 5,300 on DK against the lower cap is a bit more of an ask, but I think he's still relevant over there as well. You get him at multiple positions.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the ownership projections. OG's actually getting the most ownership out of the Raptors. And I know on the strategy show, they were talking about this. Norman Powell, he's getting under 4% ownership on DK.
Yeah, that's an interesting mark. It's just, with all of these other guys back, he hasn't really been priced back down. He's 7,100 on DraftKings, 78 on FanDuel is keeping him. His upside is kind of suppressed by that salary, I think. If you go just by Alex's boom score probability, which is his probability of hitting a 5x plus 10, he's under 5% on both sites to hit a ceiling score. So he's a guy, I think he's going to come in probably around that median projection, around the 30-point mark. He's fine. There's no reason, to consider if you want to plug him in as a mix and match type guy where you just need a small forward or a shooting guard on DK. You can plug him in there, but I would not expect him to be one of the most optimal plays. I think it's just kind of a differentiator more than anything else where you're getting to him at low ownership. So it makes sense to work in where you're getting, he's helping out your ownership product essentially and your odds of not being duped.
Now, looking over at the Cavs side of the equation, Colin Sexton, the top of this one, over on FanDuel, he's 7,500, 7,000. Over on the DraftKings side of things, Jared Allen, 7,500 on DK. He's 6,300 on FanDuel. What's your thoughts on the FanDuel side of the equation when it comes to Jared Allen?
I think he's going to be a big, big part of everybody's plans tonight, coming up as the most optimal center by a pretty wide margin. When I was writing the deep dive, which is free all year, I looked at some of the center options, and the top four guys had totaled to something like 61% of the optimal lineup appearances, and something like 33% of that is Jared Allen. So he is by far the most optimal center on the board going in. I think we can get to him a ton. 6,300 just seems like an underprice for a guy who's a 1.14 fantasy point per minute producer. Let me mute that so nobody is hearing my text messages. So 1.14 fantasy point per minute producer, and without he's going to be without some of the other guys in the front court in that offense. So he's just going to have plenty of opportunity. 38.4% rebounding share across all situations this year. When we take away some of those other big men, that jumps a little bit further. I think he's just by far our best center option on FanDuel. So going to be getting to him pretty frequently over there.
In terms of the rest of this team, in terms of the Cavs, is there a value play that you find yourself maybe looking at here? Just kind of looking at the ownership here, everyone's pretty much under 10% outside of the top four options that we have here on the Cavs.
Yeah, I think when we're dipping down to the low salary, super low ownership guys, I'm looking at them as kind of moving parts. They're not coming up supremely optimal or very frequently in that. The upside is somewhat capped. So your Chetty Osman type guys of the world, JaVale if he's out there, not really in play other than just I'll take what I get in very small doses of them. But a guy I think is, maybe a little underpriced, or actually a pair of guys that are relevant on the FanDuel slate anyway, are Larry Nance and Darius Garland. 5,300 for Nance at the small forward, where we kind of, again, need to get to some of those lower mid-range value types. And then 55 for Garland at the point guard. I think they're both interesting. They're both priced up more than that on DraftKings. So the utility comes down some, but they're both in play over there still. Productive players. Nance in particular he's been back for a handful of games. Let's see, I think 4 games back now. So he's a 0.84 fantasy point per minute producer over the entire season. But in the games back, he played 28 minutes the first night, 25, and then he jumped into the high 30s. So he's going to most likely be out there for a full starters minutes of run. 33.4 minute average across those 4 games, 10.8 real life points per game, 24.3% rebounding share, so 6.8 rebounds a game. I think you're going to be able to squeeze enough out of him when we consider that he's also averaging 2.6 stocks over that stretch, that will probably get a little bit of upside out of that price. So I kind of like getting there, and he's not over-owned on either site, so there's enough room to potentially squeeze beyond the field on what I think is a pretty good mid-range type value play.
Of course, when you want to get access to all the great premium tools and content we have over at Awesemo.com, you got to sign up for the Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. Gives you access to all the great premium tools and content that we have, such as the ownership projections that I have been referencing to. And of course, if you just want a Awesemo Plus NBA weekly pass, you can get that for $16.95. Stop guessing, start winning. Join Awesemo Plus today. Just go to awesemo.com/join. Of course, as always, appreciate everyone that's in here. Of course, if you're not subscribed to Awesemo here on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell so you know when a show is live here on the channel. Also, be sure to hit a thumbs up. We'll move on to the next game, which will be the Bulls and the Pistons. The Bulls a 3-point favorite. Over under in this one is 217.5. Let's start off on the Bulls side of the equation. So we got Zach LaVine, 8,500 as the top option. Lauri Markkanen is a guy that we are seeing getting some ownership.
Yeah, he's back 6 games ago, and he's been, jumped kind of right back into his role. He's been pretty good, 16.3 real life points and 31.2 minutes per game in the 6-game stretch, which is second to LaVine, who's at 27.5 points per game in that. And Markkanen does it on 19.5% usage, so he's not like a usage monster by any means. What's interesting though is he's a big man, and he only pulls down a 17.6% rebounding share. So you'd like to see that come up for a guy who plays in the front court and should be doing more in terms of that. And we would see his fantasy scores jump pretty significantly if he was able to increase that. He's not priced up really for his return yet, so I think we can still get to him. He's coming up pretty relevant on both sites, getting the ownership is all right. He's getting owned like around where he should be on DraftKings. So you can get there for 5,500 and then 5,600 on FanDuel. He's actually a little under owned. So I like getting to him. I think he's definitely in play. 0.92 fantasy points per minute across all situations this year. No reason not to get to at least a little bit of them. And I think on FanDuel, it makes sense to, push beyond his 11.3 ownership share.
Yeah. When you talk about basketball on the court, he's trying to get paid right now, Terry. That contract's expired. He's trying to get paid.
That is one narrative that I do believe in. Guys are looking to get paid. Now we're talking about guys who might be playing a little bit hard. I never buy into the revenge factor or, these things, but getting that paycheck maybe makes a difference.
Look, here's the other aspect. The Bulls will likely want to profile him as well. If they think they cannot re-sign him, they're going to deal him in the next week. And so they're going to want to, and that's something that we're going to talk about over the next couple of days, is just simply these players that teams are going to want to profile. And Lauri Markkanen can be one of those guys. We've seen, the Bulls go with a little switch here with their backcourt. So Lauri Markkanen's a guy thinking, look, Zach LaVine, he can go off at any point. He's clearly the best player on this team, and he's always a guy that I'm going to get to. Is there anybody outside, under, 5,000 on DK in terms of the Bulls that you want to get to?
Under 5,000 on DK. Let's see. I could maybe justify some Tomas Satoransky based on just taking a look at the boom bust tool and where he is in terms of optimal lineup rate. Coming up a little bit over 10% optimal, only 4,500 at the point guard spot. There are a lot of star caliber players at point guard though today, and I think a couple of them are in decent situations where they're not necessarily under-owned, but I would much rather have them in my lineups and pay up to them than get the value on Tomas Satoransky. I don't know that we need to pay down to him, but he's in play in that range. Otto Porter, if you wanted to look at him as like a mix and match kind of a guy. We've succeeded with him a few times through the year, but only coming up with an 18.3 minute projection from Alex as of my last update. There's just not a lot of juice there. So, he might produce something for that money, but it would be very dicey. And that's just not the kind of upside play that we're looking for. So I wouldn't go that route. So I really think the main guys in play for Chicago are Markkanen, of course, Levine, of course, and then probably Thad Young.
Looking at the Pistons side of the equation, Jeremy Grant, the most expensive on DK, 7,300. He is 7,000 over on FanDuel. And just looking at ownership, a guy that I'm not sure if he's kind of where he's out on your radar, but Saddiq Bey.
Yeah,
at 5,600.
Bey is definitely interesting. One of the leaders on this team in terms of our optimal lineup rate today. He's a different play site to site. Let me pull it back up to the pricing here so I can talk about that. 1,300 difference across sites. 4,300 on FanDuel. It's at the small forward spot. 5,600 between small forward and power forward on DK. On DraftKings, he is very much a movable piece. Somebody who can roster around where the field is, but you're not gaining a tremendous amount out of him at that price. He's going to come in probably around that median projection. You're not squeezing a lot of upside out of him there. Where you are doing that significantly is on FanDuel for that 4,300. Comes up in nearly 30% of Alex's optimal lineups and simulations. 32 point something. I clicked away from it, so it's in the middle of the number. 32-ish% boom score probability. So he's just an excellent play on the FanDuel slate. Over the team's last 10 games, he's jumped up second on the team in real life point scoring over the last 10 games with a 14.3 average and 30.9 minutes per game on only 17.3% usage. So he's pretty relevant to what they're doing over there. He's a kid that they, obviously they took him and want to get him involved in what's going on and develop him up. So I think he's getting that opportunity, kind of seizing it. So yeah, he makes a lot of sense to go to over there. And I think if you wanted to play him maybe a little bit on the field on DK, you could get a little bit sneaky with him. But I don't know that I love the upside there, like I was saying before. So I prefer the play on FanDuel.
When I think of the Pistons, I'm always looking at Jeremy Grant just because of the usage. He's going to be the guy that everyone's going to go towards. I mean, it's been one of the best signings of the offseason. So, I mean, to me, at that price point, I'm all in on Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, I think he makes sense. Again, we've been going to him a pretty good amount across the different sites, depending on where he's priced, depending on what's going on with that team. But he's been pretty steady all year, 1.04 fantasy point per minute producer for the year. And then if you take Rose and Griffin and some of these other guys off the court, he stays right around that mark. So he's just flat and a steadily productive guy. He's leading the team in usage at 27.9%, 54.9% true shooting mark. So I think he's very, very good and very productive in this spot. We're getting him at about the right price. So yeah, I think we can go to him on both sites. He's a little bit under-owned on the DK side of things too. Getting him, you're paying up to 7,300 for him there, but I think he's got upside at that price and the public's not getting to him enough. So definitely some juice to squeeze on Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, Josh Jackson getting a little more ownership than Jeremy Grant is at this point.
Yeah, he is, and I like the Grant side of that equation a little bit better than the Josh Jackson side. I trust Grant more. He gets more attention, is a more productive player between the two. So definitely give me Jeremy Grant every time in that decision.
Of course, let's move on to the next game, the Knicks and the 76ers. Philly, a 1-point favorite in this one. 213.5 is the over-under in this one. Obviously, as I just look at my sheet on the 76ers here and the outs, game time decisions, and, we have seen Doc Rivers, look, I get it from a coaching aspect. He doesn't want to tip his hand. And, when we had these game time decisions with the Sixers, you're always kind of a little nervous that, you think someone's going to play, and then magically they don't.
Yeah, and we saw that just yesterday with Ben Simmons scratching before the game. We had the news in plenty of time to react to it, fortunately, so Doc didn't completely screw us on that one. But, it's concerning, and it could be the exact same situation today. So far, we're projecting Simmons as in, and he looks playable on both sites, but probably getting a little bit too much attention. Similar story with Tobias Harris, assuming that Simmons is in. But we saw Tobias absolutely explode last night with Simmons coming out of the game. Harris gets an uptick regardless in this situation because Embiid is going to be out. So he jumps up to a 1.29 fantasy point per minute rate in that situation. Without both players, he's a 1.33 fantasy point per minute mark for the season. So just tremendous upside, a lot of opportunity here in, regardless of whether Simmons goes. But if Simmons isn't in this game, Tobias Harris should be in your lineup.
The Sixer that is getting the most ownership is Tony Bradley on DK at 3,800. Do you want to go the Tony Bradley route?
I think for 3,800, it's there for him. 1.06 DraftKings points per minute. He doesn't have to do a ton. We've got him projected for a 20-minute run. So if he delivers like right around his median projection, his normal rates, we'll be okay at that price. If he gives us a little bit more, if he sees a couple extra minutes, maybe Dwight picks up some fouls or, whatever's going on the court. If he sees a little bit of additional run, we could see him get to a decent ceiling score for that price. So yeah, I think he is relevant on the DraftKings slate. He's never one of my go-to guys at that kind of a minutes projection. If we had him at like 26, 28 minutes, I think he becomes more and more interesting at those prices. But he's definitely playable, definitely on the slate, and will be a part of some lineups for me. I do like on FanDuel, you're getting him slightly more under-owned and a decent little boom score percentage where you can get him as a power forward for 3,700. So I do think he's got some utility across both sites.
Looking at the Knicks, do you want to get to a 10,000 Julius Randle?
Wants to is strong. I think that he's justified the salary. It's a crazy world. We're living in a $10,000 Julius Randle world. But I think he's justified it through the season. It is asking quite a bit of us to put him in our lineups. He does have positional flex, power forward, and center on DK. Gains a little bit of utility, and people are scared off by paying that much. So I think you can go to him here and there. Do I want to dramatically exceed the 5% that the public is projected for? If we consider like maybe 3xing that at 15% dramatic, then I guess I do. So I could get to like that kind of a range. I would not be going to like 60% Julius Randle for $10,000 though. I think that's a little bit too much. So I think he does have a little bit more relevance. 9,800 on FanDuel, where you have him as a power forward only. Squeezes a little bit more optimal lineup appearances out of that. 1.23 fantasy points per minute all year long. Has just been spectacular for the Knicks all season. Really, really emerging. So very happy about it as a Knicks fan. But I don't love the salary that he's at now as a DFS player.
Well, 60 points in 4 of his last 6 games. And I was watching the game against the Magic because I'm a Magic fan and I've kind of lived through watching awful basketball because that's just what it is at this point, where he had 18 points, 10 rebounds, and 17 assists. He was just finding the open guy. I mean, when you see that number, what he's going out there, and when you're talking about ownership at 5%, I mean, I know it's a steep price you got to pay for him. Man, he could be, a slate breaker.
Absolutely.
Just because of ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. People are not going to be on him. And to your point, he can rack up points, fantasy points for us in different ways. He's always been a willing passer, but this year he's really taken on that role. He's a primary facilitator for this team. For the season across all situations, 36.2% assist share. So he gets a ton of their assists on this team, and he's been doing it all year long, and it is a focus of what they do on the court, particularly when these point guards are question marks, or, you get Alec Burks as like a primary ball handler for part of this game, depending on what's going on at the point, or if Quickly's out there, he's a scorer. He's not a facilitator. So more and more of that falls on Julius Randle. So yeah, he can do that. He's also got a 30.8% rebounding rate. He does a lot of the legwork for this team. So for sure, he's on the board and in play. And like I said, I would consider going like 3x that 5% ownership without worrying about it too much.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the Knicks here today is just who is going to be available. When you look at the injury report, Elfrid Payton, questionable. Mitchell Robinson, questionable. Quickly, questionable. We know Derrick Rose is out. So it then becomes of who is going to be available. We're just kind of waiting to find out that news at this point.
Yeah, and I think, some of those guys, if they're all out there, I think it takes away from a lot of them. Like I think Peyton and Quickly, given that they're probably not going to get, big minute shares just coming back, probably, eat into one another's production. I think Mitch Robinson is going to eat into Nerlens Noel's upside for the low price that he's at. But I don't think Mitch is going to do enough for us at the prices that he's at. I doubt we see him out on the court even enough. And if he is, who knows what kind of shape he's going to be in, might commit a few lazy fouls. It's just when Mitch comes back from injury, it might take him a few games to, round back into the Mitch Robinson that we know. But I think he does take away from some of the other front court options. Alec Burks, like I mentioned, will probably do some ball handling regardless of the situation, and is at an affordable price on FanDuel, 4,900 at the shooting guard spot, 5,800 on DK, small forward only, makes him a lot less relevant. He's on the board. You can play him. Nobody's going to him. So I think he gains a little bit of relevance just through being a leverage play who could put up a raw point total for you. I don't expect a tremendous amount of upside out of it, but I think you can get there when people aren't. Zig when they zag kind of a play. RJ Barrett, kind of a similar breakdown across sites, more affordable on FanDuel, 900 more over on DraftKings. Takes away most of his upside, makes him more of a utility type play. I think he's got a little bit of upside for us on FanDuel at that price. Small forward, again, it's just a spot where I want to move some pieces around and extract some value.
Of course, when you need to find out who is in and out, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Awesemo NBA. And of course, our main guy, News God, you got to give him a follow as well, as he's always giving us the updates on the injury report. Has actually just put something in Slack. The 5:30 injury report is out there. So you got to be sure to give him a follow at newsgod_DFS. And of course, check out everything we have over awesemo.com for our NBA coverage, including the deep dive articles that is up there. We can move on to the next game of the slate, and that'll be Dallas and Portland. Dallas 2-point favorite, 228.5 on this one. As you look at, I think where a lot of people are going to look at is, are you going to go Luka or Harden tonight? When we're looking at those top end options.
Yeah, they were both coming up, pretty frequently for me throughout the day as I was doing some crunches alongside writing the deep dive article. And, I made Luka Doncic the cover boy of the article, but I first tried to make Harden the cover guy, but somebody else had already used the pictures. So that doesn't mean I prefer Doncic. It's just how the picture came out. Little behind the scenes inside baseball for everybody there. I like both players. I think they're both worth paying up for. They're both coming up pretty frequently optimal. Luka at 10-8 on FanDuel, a little bit more interesting for the optimal lineup rates than he is at 11,000 on DK. Getting owned on both sites, but I think it's okay. I think we can not necessarily sweat it. We've got enough unique combinations that we can put together with some of the weird values on the board. 1.51 fantasy points per minute producer for the season. Pretty solid matchup against the Blazers. So I think this is a spot we can go to Luka. This is the second highest total on the night. The one that you mentioned was in the 228 range. So I think we have to take some shots at this game, and there are a couple high-end players in this game to go to, and a few value plays. So Luka's very, very much on the board for me. Same thing with the big point guard on the other side of this one, Dame Lillard.
The guy I was going to bring up from the Trailblazers is CJ McCollum, of course, came back earlier this week, and you look at his 3 games, in terms of minutes played, 26, 21, and 28, coming off a 32-point, actual points scored in the game, a 46-pointer on DK. How are you evaluating this backcourt, and how much exposure do you want to get to Dame and CJ?
So it would be more about getting to Dame, I think, still for me, although CJ does have more relevance on DraftKings, where I'm more primarily a FanDuel player. So for 8,000 on FanDuel, even a kind of a flat shooting guard position, he wasn't really jumping to the top of the board for me. He was a fine mix-in type of play. I think we do get some potential value out of him. There is a little bit of upside. He jumped back into the lineup immediately, seeing 32.8% usage. Averaging 17.7 real life points over the 3-game stretch, 24.8 minutes a game, but he hit 27 minutes in the most recent outing, 27.6% assist share, 14.5% rebounding rate, shoots 46.2% from beyond 3 for the season. He's just a fantastic player. So assuming we're getting regular run out of him or something approaching that, I think he's definitely in play. And I do like him at 7,300, where you can flex him between point guard and shooting guard on DraftKings. I think that makes him very interesting. And the public's not getting to him enough. The 10% ownership mark is a little bit low for how much utility he has. The upside might be somewhat capped, but not spectacularly so. He's got like a 12% boom score probability from Alex. So I like the play for a discount on DraftKings.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, obviously you got to pay up for Dame, but we're talking under 5% ownership on DK.
Yeah, and that's an interesting spot. Coming in about triple that on FanDuel, where he's 10,000 as opposed to 10.5 against a lower cap. So it's a big ask on both sides, but I mean he's super productive. 1.35 fantasy points per minute during McCollum across all situations this season. 3 games since McCollum came back, he's averaged 39 real life points, 37.7 minutes per game. 34.4% usage rate, doesn't really slip for having his running mate come back. 42.1% assist share. A lot of those buckets that McCollum's going to be scoring, Dame's going to be picking up the assist on it. So it doesn't really handicap him in any way. So I really like getting to Dame as much as possible on this slate as well. A little bit more relevant on FanDuel, where he comes up more optimal, better leverage score. But like you said, only 5% raw ownership on DK. So that's an easy mark to, again, maybe just look at tripling up the field on DK. You're only spending 15% of your point guard shares in doing that, and you're getting to one of the best players on the slate. So I like the play on both sides.
Looking at Kristaps Porzingis, who is getting a little bit more ownership than Luka. Of course, he is 7,700 over on DK. What do you want to be under or over the field when it comes to Porzingis today?
Tricky spot. He's got center eligibility on DraftKings, which gives him at least a little bit of utility and flexibility. I think we do have to go to him on FanDuel just as one of the top point power forward options over there. There's a ton of talent at point guard tonight, and then a lot of the other positions have a few star type of guys and then a bunch of just mix-in type of guys who probably will have some value and will end up delivering. But as like standout star caliber players from the upper mid-range, the lower upper range, losing track of what I'm saying there, Porzingis is one of the better options on the board. So 20.4% optimal rate from Alex for FanDuel. I think he's kind of a go-to play over there. 1.2 fantasy points per minute across all situations. We're going to be without Willie Cauley-Stein and James Johnson again. He sees a bit of an uptick, 1.23 fantasy points per minute in that situation. Excellent shooter for a big man, 58.4% true shooting, 36.6 from beyond 3. He can do it in a lot of different ways. So I think he's definitely relevant and somebody that we can get to.
You mentioned about Willie Cauley-Stein not going to be playing here tonight. Do you want to get to some Maxi Kleber?
Yeah, I think Maxi's at a price at least that has some utility on FanDuel, 3,800 at the power forward, $5,000 on DraftKings is power forward and center eligible, but I just don't know how much I would get to him on at that point. 0.72 DraftKings point per minute guy. Maybe a few shares, but that is a heavy freight to pay for Maxi. When he is seeing minutes alongside a lot of the starters and kind of moving up in the the hierarchy of things, which is would be the situation that we set it up for on Wowie today. He actually drops from 0.71 fantasy points per minute to a 0.67 per minute and sees just 10.1% usage. So it's a tricky spot for him to actually be as productive as we would need. I think it's all about the salary on FanDuel, but he is getting a lot of ownership. So one of the more negatively leveraged plays on the FanDuel slate at the power forward spot. Tough ask. I think we can try and find value elsewhere and maybe try and undercut the field, particularly on FanDuel.
Of course, I mentioned about how you got to be following News God. Just threw up that the Wizards have put their starting lineup out there. So you got to follow him. Lynn is starting with Westbrook, Beal, Matthews, and Hachimura. So that's one of those things that you got to take advantage of. News God, it breaks. He's going to bring it to us here. So I always appreciate what he does. Of course, if you're not subscribed to also here on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know when a new show is live here on the channel. Of course, NBA Live Before Lock will be coming up after this same exact stream. So you don't have to go anywhere else. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. What are you doing with Josh Richardson here? 5,100 on DK. We are seeing some ownership on him, though.
Yeah, surprising amount of ownership. So he gained some utility in this situation as well. Alex has him projected for just under 34 minutes on the night, 0.74 fantasy point per minute producer. You get the flexibility that I talked about that I really like. And I think that's what's really making him relevant is that flex between the guard and the forward spot. So you've got the ability now to move him around to 5 different spots in your roster. Comes up decently optimal on the DraftKings slate. for in Alex's simulations, but he doesn't have a massive boom score probability, which concerns me. Only 5,100. He should be at, I would think, a better mark than where we've got him. So I would like, when I say should, I mean in terms of a play that is that popular, not this player in that situation. So that's a little bit concerning against the 17.5% ownership share. So it's another guy where if we've got a 1v1 type decision where the other guy ranks out pretty similarly in some of those categories, but is getting less ownership, I think that's a good spot to consider a pivot to one of those other mid-tier kind of value plays at either position. And there should be enough of them with the ability to roster him at so many different spots. There should always be another good option right next to him that you might get a little bit lower owned, better leverage. But he is coming up, in some of the optimal shares. So he's not without utility for sure.
Of course, March Madness is here, and we have got you covered at Awesemo.com, and you can take advantage of our March Madness DFS package, which is for $29.95, gives you access to our college basketball predictions for the entire tournament. So you got to check that out, that package that's up there right now. You can see it right there on the screen. $29.95 gives you the entire tournament for March Madness. So take advantage of that right now, as we're all watching our brackets, but got to play a little DFS. We got a great package there for you, $29.95. Now, I know the game that everyone wants to hear you talk about is what value on the Lakers are we getting to here, Terry?
Oh boy. I was hoping we could just skip this one. Do we have to talk about it? Nobody cares about this game, right?
Yeah, look, it says a lot about the Lakers. And look, when LeBron went down the other day, I said, "Oh man, we are about to get some Laker value, and we're going to see some guys get some run that normally don't get run." I mean, and obviously, we look at the ownership right now. THT is a guy that is getting a good amount of that ownership. You would imagine Harrell is going to get a lot of usage. Caruso is going to get some time. You start looking at, Markieff Morris, Dennis Schroeder. What does Kyle Kuzma do? I mean, everyone's going to be looking for value tonight with the Lakers, who are a massive underdog, 10-point underdog in this one. 215 is our over-under number.
Yeah, and you didn't exactly just name the 2035 class of the NBA Hall of Fame just then, right? We're talking about Dennis Schroeder plus a bunch of sub-replacement level guys at this point. Horton Tucker, I think, has some upside for sure, potential to develop into a decent NBA player. 0.93 fantasy point per minute guy, so I don't want to bring him down too much. He's been productive for us. I know everybody likes him. Saw what he can do in the preseason, has seen him in limited doses through the year. So he's very much in play, comes up a decent amount of optimal, and is not expensive. So Horton Tucker is a guy that, I think we can definitely get to in LeBron's absence. Let's see, he's 0.93 fantasy point per minute across all situations. Like I said, if we take LeBron and AD off the floor, that becomes a 1.18 mark for the season. So that makes him hyper relevant. He is definitely going to be in play. What I don't like is the negative leverage. You're getting a pretty significant mark on the DraftKings slate. I do think we need to go to him. I just am starting to think maybe it makes sense to come down a little bit below what is a pretty significant public ownership share on a player who only a 24.5-minute projection from Alex, and not somebody who's rock solid production wise. So we've seen some roller coaster action from him in the past. I think he is coming up enough that it justifies maybe if you want to use his optimal lineup rate from our boom bust tool, which is in the 25% range, as kind of a guideline for maybe where you want to roster him and let the public get a little bit overexposed to him. I think that might be a good tactic for today. But definitely a relevant player on both sites. 4,000 at the shooting guard spot. I think we can get to him with a little bit more relevance and utility, despite the lower optimal lineup rate. There just aren't a ton of great shooting guard options on FanDuel. So I think he's just in play as we cycle through some of those options over there. Schroeder, who you mentioned, 6,100 at the point on FanDuel, 69 point guard and shooting guard on DK. Very relevant on both slates. Like him better for the money on FanDuel, pay less and get to him. I think he's definitely going to be, if he's not scoring the ball, I don't know how many points this team's even going to score tonight. If he's not setting up some of these other guys for opportunities, well, I don't know what they're going to do for offense. So I think we have to consider him. I think we have to get to him. 230 minutes without the two stars on the floor. He goes from 0.87 to a 1.08 fantasy point per minute mark. So again, just very relevant, created by the absence of LeBron and AD.
Do you want to get to Harrell on FanDuel though?
In limited doses, I think it makes sense to get to him, but I don't think I would be above the field where we're only getting one bite at the center apple.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's always the concern on FanDuel. He's got more utility on DK where you can move him around, play him alongside another center, or just it's just limiting, and it gives us a little of an opportunity cost against the other centers on the slate. That said, the center outside of Jared Allen, it was relatively flat. He was one of those guys who was somewhat relevant to the rest of that conversation, where Allen was in the 30s in terms of his optimal lineup rate. And a lot of these other guys were in that 10% range. So it's not like we're really shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of opportunity cost, unless we're only considering it the versus Jared Allen's upside kind of a look at it. He does lead the team in usage in this situation, 28.9% usage rate with the stars off the floor. So he's going to be relevant to what they're trying to do out there. 1.36 fantasy point per minute rate without those guys on the floor, and also 270 minutes. So definitely relevant. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be able to succeed at what they're trying to do against what is a decently tough Phoenix defense. So it's also about the matchup that they've got.
Yeah.
I don't love the spot.
Yeah, I was going to mention that this is a tough matchup going against Sun. I mean, there's so many questions about where we're going to go in terms of Lakers. Who do you want to, take your shots on? Maybe you want to, maybe it's a Kyle Kuzma. You think this is going to be a Kuzma game, but there is another side of this equation. That's the Suns. Of how are you evaluating the Suns in terms of this, which a game that they should, win?
Yeah, they should win, and they should probably win going away, considering what we've said about all these guys. Like, if this Lakers team was in the NCAA tournament, I'm not sure I would be choosing them. Like, they are just going to be bad. So I think we can get to some of these Suns, but I'm not overly excited about it. It's not something I like to do a lot of, but in this specific situation, I just think there's enough momentum behind the idea that A, they're probably going to light this team up. B, they don't need to really run out a guy like Chris Paul, an aging veteran type of a guy, in a game like this. I don't think it's going to totally kneecap his minutes, but we've got him down to 31.8 minute projection. I could see him coming in like that 28-minute mark, which definitely is going to shave down some of his upside. He's having a great year, 1.16 fantasy points per minute. But I just become concerned just a little bit in less of a blowout discussion than they're probably not going to need him to get there. A lot of times we talk about, in the blowout, they're going to need these guys to produce anyway. That's where the blowout comes from. In this situation against replacement level players, I don't know that they're going to need all of Chris Paul. They might look at it as an opportunity to give him a little bit of extended rest. He's a phenomenal player, obviously, nearly a 50% assist share on the year, just spectacular, 49.6% of the assists. So even if he's out there kind of taking it easy, if he's getting his full complement of minutes, he should be fine to produce. He can just set up guys all night long against this team. It's just about the minutes for me, but he's in play. He's on the board on both sites, owned around where he should be, costs around what he should. So I would look at it that way. And then, some of these other guys, I think there's utility in Bridges. I think there's utility in Crowder. Booker has some upside. We've talked about he's spiked a little bit in their last 10 games. His point per game is up like 1.5 points. His usage is up like 3%. So they're going to him a little bit more. He's been a little bit more productive than we saw throughout the season. But nobody really leaps off the page. A lot of just kind of mix and match guys and guys that you can squeeze some utility out of and plug into rosters, but they wouldn't be my first or second clicks in most of my lineups.
See what you were saying about Chris Paul. I had that same thought about Devin Booker. I mean, if this is early on in the fourth quarter, this game's in control, do they not run him out there? That'd be my concern with Booker. But I mean, look, he has that obviously potential. But to me, it's a matter of how close can the Lakers keep this game? That to me is a question in terms of how I want to develop my rosters for tonight. But look, you're going to look at value in terms of this one. But look, I would rather try to find value in, say, the Nets Wizards game, just because I know how high scoring of a game that's going to be.
Yeah, we just know that's going to be astronomically more scoring. Even if it falls 10 points short of the over-under that Vegas has set on it, it's still going to probably be the highest scoring game of the night by like 10 points. It's going to be much, much more productive. I think maybe one that's a little bit off the board for value as well, by that same token, is the Dallas Portland game that we talked about. Second highest total on the night. Some of those guys are interesting in that mid-range, like your Carmelos of the world, guys that don't immediately leap to mind for having massive upside on this slate, but just kind of mixing them in for some value from the mid-range. Carmelo's 52 on FanDuel, 51 on DK. So you gain a little bit there, and just, off the beaten path type of picks. If DFS is out there for Dallas, I think he's somewhat relevant in terms of, a guy who is sub 5% in like most of our categories, but is probably going to be out there for minutes. Could see some sneaky utility and some sneaky upside. So a 6-game slate, we don't have to go totally haywire trying to get to some of those really low-owned plays, really less likely plays. But I think if we're doing it and if we're looking for some off-the-beaten-path type value, yes, to your point, definitely that Brooklyn game, but maybe a little bit sneakier that Dallas-Portland game. That's the second highest total of the night.
I'll mention J.D. Bickerstaff says JaVale McGee will play tonight after he's missed the previous game with an illness. I know JaVale was somebody that we had discussed. Of course, EMac and Greg are coming up next for NBA Live Before Lock. They'll have you all the breaking news, and I'm sure they'll talk about Laker value of where they want to go in terms of that. But I will tell you, I will definitely be watching Nets Wizards because, well, it's just going to be, it's probably be no defense at all play in that game. So it should be a fun up and down the court type of game.
Yeah, for sure. EMac's been throwing out the term all-star game caliber defense, and I quoted that and stole it from him in the deep dive. So I'll do it again on the deeper dive right before he gets on the air. But yeah, that's what we're going to be getting in this one. It's going to just be matador defense where they're just letting guys blow past them. So there are just a ton of options to look to in that game. We can absolutely get to all the guards. I mean, not at the same time by any means. That would be a neat trick. But yeah, I would certainly consider heavy doses of Harden, Irving, Beal, and Westbrook. I think Joe Harris, who we talked about, is very, very relevant, particularly if that shot is falling. Doesn't need to do a lot for his salary when his shot is going down. Rui Hachimura is very relevant. We got the news that Alex Len is starting. So all of a sudden, we've got a guy on the board at the center spot on FanDuel. We talk about values there. Now we've got a 3,500 guy. He's projected for 20.9 minutes in my last update, but that was before we had the starter news. So if he jumps to even a 24-ish minute projection, that makes a 1.01 fantasy point per minute contributor somewhat interesting for the min price, and 3,700 on DK, similar type story. So I think he's very relevant. Getting to like DeAndre Jordan on this slate, like Bruce Brown, some of these guys, the Jeff Greens of the world, a little bit of a stretch. I think Green might have a little bit of sneaky utility just for the fact that, like you said, he's probably going to be out there for closing run in the fourth quarter instead of Blake. So I think maybe we've got his minutes a little bit low. It's not like it would send him through the roof if we give him 4 extra minutes, but he might be a little bit sneaky.
Yeah, I just would not go the Blake Griffin route. I don't just look, he's going to be on minutes restriction. And I mean, look, probably in that 18 minute range is probably what I would expect from his design.
Yeah. And that's one, again, I don't have the, in the last 57 minutes version of the Boom Bust in front of me. So check it for updates, guys. I expect that minutes share will probably come down a little. He does look like a reasonable play as we have it right now, but keep an eye on it over the next hour or so. For me, it's an uncomfortable one. The boss sees it differently. The tool sees it differently right now based on what I'm seeing. So keep an eye on where that optimal lineup rate is and where his leverage score is before you make any Blake decisions.
And of course, EMac and Greg are coming up next. NBA Live Before Lock, and it'll take you up till 7 o'clock Eastern time. So good luck to everyone tonight. Also, we want to thank our sponsor, No House Advantage. Check out those player props they have over there. So that's going to do it for myself and Terry. Coming up next, you got EMac and Greg taking you up till 7 o'clock. Peace.
Still your line, EMac. Still your all-star game defense line.
Plagiarism.
That's right. Have a good show, boys.
Oh, we get the gentleman and a scholar version of Greg today. I like this.
Well, I don't know if I'm either of those. I just felt like seeing.
You've been watching much of the tourney?
A little bit. It was pretty nice out. I spent a lot of time outside today.
Nice. Let's do this.
I mean, unless we want to listen to this music for another 15 minutes.
All right, Awesemo, here we go. It's your old pal EMac coming to you with one Greg Ehrenberg as we get ready for the NBA Live Before Lock Sunday Fun Day edition. We have half a dozen games. We've got 3 going off at 7, 1 at 8, and a couple at 10. We're waiting on a little bit of news. Still wondering what's going on here with Mr. Ben Simmons, who was a before lock late scratch last night with knee soreness. Greg, did you play any DFS last night? How did it go? How's life been? I haven't talked to you in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's not totally true. We do DM each other about.
Yeah, that is true.
Usually, like you have some like really random stuff that'll come out of nowhere that you'll DM me, asking me about like sports betting or other stuff. You're not asking me for life advice. You have a little more experience than me there, and that would be weird if like you were DMing me like, dude, I need like relationship advice. I'd be like, I don't know you, Mac. You've been married for like 80 years. I wouldn't know what to say to you. But yeah, I mean, we DM about other stuff.
Yeah, moved across the country, been laid off like 8 times. Let's see, been married. Yeah, I got all the life stuff down. Bought multiple cars, multiple houses. Anybody needs anything from me, I've probably done it. But yeah, what we haven't done is tonight's slate. Going to be interesting. We are brought to you by No House Advantage. You're going to want to check them out. I'll drop the link in chat here. We'll talk about them as we go throughout the show, but we have free projections for their site. They over at nohouseadvantage.com. They also have an app available in most app stores. What is the deal there? Well, it's prop betting, player props, but with a DFS twist or a fantasy sports twist. We don't have to worry about salary caps. We don't have to worry about projections. It's picking over-unders of lines that they have set, usually 18 or so hours in advance. And then you decide a confidence rating on each of the questions that you want to choose from. So we have about 50 or so tonight. And then you can rank those depending on the size of the contest, usually 7, 8, 9, 10. And from there, you can go to confidence levels. The highest is the most probable one. If it becomes correct, you win, you get those points. And Overlay is a marketing tool there. Promo code Awesemo gets you a $20 deposit match with your first deposit. Can I change a tire? No, that's what AAA is for.
I could change a tire.
If I needed to, yes, but I prefer not to. What kind of truck? Well, I've driven 3 different Nissan trucks throughout my life, and I now have a Nissan Rogue. So clearly I am a Nissan fan, I guess. There we go. All right, let's look at the first one. So here's an interesting one. So I learned a lot by working with Adam Sheriff for the last 4 years. I think he's the best there is looking at minutes and rotation, but you know who gives him a run for his money every single day? It's Laffy, it's Josh, it's Greg. We're here, Greg. You may have been a behind the scenes projection guy at another site for a long time that now that you're with us, they just said, yeah, we're not going to do DFS anymore because we just can't. That's what we're getting from Greg. What are we doing with Blake Griffin's minutes? That's the big buildup here. Do you have an idea? Do you have a guess? Is it 18? Is it more than 18? Is it enough to make him playable? What do we got?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to play very much. I mean, we know that he's going to have a minutes restriction. The Nets have said that as long as he plays, he's not going to play a ton. So I definitely don't think it's going to be enough to be viable. I gave him 16 minutes, and I don't know for sure if that's accurate or not, but I want to give him a certain number of minutes. It's going to do a couple of things, right? So I'm looking at it from a DFS perspective sometimes when I'm projecting minutes, and I don't even necessarily, this might seem weird, I don't necessarily always want it to be 100% accurate because number one, sometimes that's impossible. But then number two, also, I look at the Nets situation in the front court and I just say, I don't want any exposure to any of these guys. So I'm trying to set up the minutes in a way where Blake Griffin gets some, DeAndre Jordan gets some, Nicholas Claxton gets some, and I think all 3 of them play. And by the way, Jeff Green's going to play center minutes also. So I think all these guys are going to be in the mix, but I don't want exposure to any of them. So I'm going to have all of them in a situation where it's like, hey, I'm going to give all of these guys somewhere in the neighborhood of like 16 to 22 minutes. All of them are going to play. They're going to be in the rotation, but I don't want any of these guys coming up in my DFS lineups. If I start to get really aggressive and say like, hey, I think the Nets are going to only give Blake Griffin 8 minutes and maybe they give DeAndre Jordan like 26 minutes or something. There's so much guesswork involved there. And I think it's a situation that since we know the minutes are going to be spread out, I don't think there's a whole lot of upside. So I just want it to be in a spot where I don't get to any of these guys at all.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. There's really only going to be a couple playable guys from each side of the ball for this one, despite approaching a 250 over/under. This, of course, is the Wizards in Brooklyn taking on the Nets. The Wizards are 2-0 in this particular series. They have been a track meet, to say the least, Greg. The previous game, the first game of the series was on January 3rd. This game was in Brooklyn. The Wizards won 123-122, which, if my math is correct, that's a 245 point total. And then on January 31st, they won in Washington 149-146. Yes, folks, that was in regulation. They almost scored 300 points there. The interesting thing, no James Harden in either of these. One, he was still with Houston, and the other, he just didn't play. So we've got Bradley Beal and Russell Westbrook. I was going to say John Wall. No, it's not John Wall. If Russell Westbrook here, both are phenomenal. Westbrook is 10th in the league in usage. He is half an assist away from averaging a triple-double yet again. Beal just fell into second place in usage. It's Luka Doncic that passed him, and those are amongst players that have at least 1,100 minutes on the court. Beal's leading the league in scoring by 2 points. This is an amazing situation here, but we've got some expensive prices here. Westbrook is actually more expensive now than Beal, deservedly so, and James Harden is at the lofty price tag, also deservedly so. How are you getting to these guys? Because we don't have the screaming value. We'll talk about the Lakers. There's value. It's not screaming though.
No, and it was kind of funny too, because I mean, when we first had LeBron out yesterday, and who knows when he's coming back, we know Anthony Davis is out. I just assumed when we first started to look at this slate, like before looking at the prices, that there was going to be a massive amount of value on the Lakers. This is always the kind of situation where it seems like that would be the case, but it isn't. A lot of these guys are kind of already priced up because Anthony Davis has been out, and for whatever other reason, just somehow, I mean, like I have Taylor Horton-Tucker in a bunch of lineups, but there is no other player on the Lakers that stands out to me as some great value play. I think the minutes are going to be somewhat spread out. I think the usage is hard to predict. And a lot of guys like Dennis Schroeder's already been priced up on DraftKings, at least. On FanDuel, he is a much more reasonable price tag. Montrezl Harrell's priced up. Kyle Kuzma's priced up. So yeah, I mean, there isn't anybody that stands out as an obvious value there. So to bring it back to your point on what to do about the Nets-Wizards situation, James Harden is a priority play for me on this slate. He's a little easier to get to on DraftKings than FanDuel, but there's a bunch of good options to pay up for, and it is a little hard to get up to them without making some sacrifices. I definitely did it in my lineups, but I have some crappy punt plays like Alex Len that I don't feel very good about, because I've gone down the Alex Len road before, EMac, and it has not gone well this year.
There are not puppy dogs and unicorns at the end of that road. There is nothing but despair more often than not. Do you think he'll get run off the court? Do we see Moritz Wagner coming back in to the mix after being DNP'd like randomly after starting multiple games? Scott Brooks.
I don't think so. At least I didn't give him minutes. And we got the starting lineup. Alex Len is starting again today. Okay. I gave Alex Len 20 minutes, and that still makes him one of the best value plays on DraftKings, which says less about Alex Len and more about the state of the cheap plays combined with the state of the expensive plays. Because if James Harden goes out and scores 65, 70 fantasy points against the Wizards, not really a crazy outcome when you consider this game as a 248 point total. I have Harden projected as the highest player on the slate by a pretty wide margin. And if he goes out and scores that many fantasy points, then if we get any of these cheap guys like an Alex Len just score somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 22 fantasy points, there's a good chance that that guy ends up on the optimal lineup, even if he doesn't have the typical normal big game that we'd expect from some of those really strong value plays, just because it's going to be really important, I think, to get to some of these stars on the slate. And there's definitely some risk we have to take in terms of crappy value plays, but I don't really see a way around it with the way that some of these stars on the slate are in situations that they're in.
All right. The only other person of note injury-wise in this game is Davis. It's Davis, Greg, not Davis. Davis Bertans. He's European or something like that. Just teasing, but not really. Aggro teasing.
I know he's not from here, and I know it's pronounced Davis Bertans. It's not You're not like pulling one on me here. Can you pronounce Denny's last name?
Abia?
All right, that's fine. I don't know exact oaths, but I do it wrong every time. But yeah, that's about right. He's also not from America.
No, he is not. All right, moving on to our next. Rui Hachimura, I think, is in play. Kind of got called out by Brooks, and then Brooks is giving him a million minutes. He's rebounding harder, taking a lot more shots. He is a viable option. But for as many points as are projected in this game, kind of tough to get to out of those the core four, shall we say? Anything else, Joe Harris, anything like that, or just moving along? Mix and match guys throughout your lineups. Not putting the kibosh on anybody, but nobody's really popping.
James Harden's a priority. I have Kyrie Irving in lineups. There's nobody else on the Nets that I'm really getting to, at least on DraftKings. On FanDuel, the other thing too is we're still waiting for the Zach LaVine news. I mean, not the Ben Simmons news, and that's going to impact the slate so much. And I don't know when we're going to get that news. I actually suspect it's going to happen after the show ends. Joe Harris on FanDuel is a much better play than he is on DraftKings. He's only 4,500 on FanDuel, so I think that he is worth rostering as a small forward position, especially because small forward is one of the spots on FanDuel that doesn't have the strong pay up options that other positions have. So I think that it makes sense to punt small forward on FanDuel. Only guy that I really like at the position a whole ton is Larry Nance Jr. Outside of him, I think the position is kind of a crapshoot. So Joe Harris, somebody I'm willing to get to for cheap, but on DraftKings, it's just going to be Kyrie Irving and James Harden for me.
All right, we're on to our next game here. We've got Toronto at Cleveland. You mentioned the magic word there, Larry Nance. We have Toronto favored by 7.5 on the road, 216 over under. Toronto, everybody is good to go, including Fred VanVleet. Jump into the link. I'm dropping it in my pinned tweet. Jump into the Fred Van Elite Fan Club contest. And if you have an Awesemo avatar and win, I will get you 30 free days of Awesemo premium content. That is almost like a $90 value there. Just $1, top 20 paid. I have to play Fred VanVleet. If he gets ruled out, I play his direct backup. This does not work out well for me. It works out well for you. 10% rake, and usually 2 or 3 people forget to set their lineups. Why are you guys not in this league yet? I don't know. I had somebody win it the other day and said, EMac, I didn't have my Awesemo avatar. I said, well, it's part of the rule. You got to have the Awesemo avatar to win. So they were very sad. How do you get the Awesemo avatar? I will drop that link into chat as well. But if you are rocking the Awesemo avatar and you meet some of these GPP criteria, if you get a top 3 finish, you can get 30 free days of Awesemo premium content. A little easier to beat just 100 people in this contest, but we want to spread the good word for Awesemo out there. All right. Toronto, they're all healthy. I'm not really excited about any of them. Cleveland, yeah, not really excited. Almost said Winston. His dad, Darius Garland, the son, has had a couple nice games here. We've got Colin Sexton that have been okay, but how is as much as I rail against defense, how is the defense here for Toronto? Do you think they're going to bog down anything from that Cleveland Sexton backcourt? Jordan is going crazy. I think he's laughing. I hope he's not laughing at me. I know he's laughing at me.
Yeah, he's definitely laughing at you. But I think it's good laughs. You're just entertaining the people here, EMac. So the Cleveland side of the game. I mean, Toronto's defense has been pretty disappointing this year in terms of what I think we expected from them coming into the season. I mean, as a whole, the team right now, not only outside of the playoff picture, not even in the play-in game picture right now. So the season ended today. They're the 11th seed in the East, so definitely been not as good as expected. But it's a little hard to know the true talent of the Raptors defense just because they've had so many injuries this year. They also dealt with COVID for an extended period of time. So they just recently have Pascal Sayakam, OG Anunoby, and Fred VanVleet all getting back into the lineup. So it does stand to reason that their defense is going to be a little bit better than what it's been. From the Cleveland side of the game, I have some exposure to Colin Sexton. I think that he's a little bit underpriced on DraftKings. Larry Nance, I mentioned before, I think that he's a good option on both FanDuel and DraftKings. I've been much higher on Larry Nance than pretty much everybody over the last handful of games ever since Larry Nance came back from injury and started playing full minutes with no Kevin Love out. So Larry Nance, somebody who once again I have projected as a pretty good play here. His minutes over the last 3 games, 38 minutes, 37 minutes, 34 minutes. He sucked last game, but he was good in the 2 previous games. And as long as I'm going to expect those same amount of minutes from him, I think that he's a little bit underpriced. He's somebody, if we look at earlier in the year where he was healthy / Late last year when he was starting and played a significant role, he was somebody who was priced in the high 6K range to low 7K range. So even with this price tag up a little bit, up to 5,800 on DraftKings and then at 5,300 on FanDuel, I think he's the best small forward play on FanDuel on the slate. And on DraftKings, even where he's a little bit more expensive, I still think he's somebody worth going overweight to the field on.
All right. I didn't hit on the injury news there, but from it's nothing new, but from the Cleveland side, Taurean Prince still out with the shoulder injury, Kevin Love still out with the calf, Andre Drummond waiting for a trade or a buyout, Matthew Dellavedova, he's potentially going to be coming back. He hasn't played in a full calendar year, but he might come back at some point here. And then JaVale McGee is available to play. Anything else from this one? We're going to cruise through some of these so we can do questions and talk about no house advantage and some other fun stuff.
So depending on the status of Ben Simmons, if he ends up playing and we don't get the Sixers value, then Isaac Okoro is going to make it into some of my DraftKings lineup just because he's cheap and is going to play minutes. And for this slate, I think anybody who's cheap is going to play minutes is going to be somebody who ends up in like 20-ish% of my lineups on DraftKings, just because I want to be able to get up to guys like James Harden, Bradley Beal, Luka Doncic. And the only way to do that is to play like crappy value plays. So give me the crappy value plays that at least I know are going to play minutes.
Chicago at Detroit. Chicago favored by 3 on the road, 217.5 over under. No Garrett Temple. He is still out with an ankle, may return by the weekend. We've got Hamidou Diallo, who was acquired in a trade. He is not ready to play yet. It's going to be out a couple more games with the groin injury. Wayne Ellington out with an adductor. Rodney Magruder out with an elbow injury. And we have an interesting spot. I know you do play over on FanDuel. We have Isaiah Stewart has been it is Isaiah Stewart. I'm blanking on the name. Stewart has been very cheap, been getting minutes. And do you think he's surpassing Plumlee in the rotation? Or are they going to give the youngster some minutes? What do we do here at the Pistons front court? Because I'm not doing cartwheels about much else on the Pistons.
No, I don't think he's going to be passing Mason Plumlee in the center rotation. I think they're going to play split minutes going forward, but with more of the minutes going towards Plumlee. I don't expect them to play minutes together. Right now, I have it for tonight, 26 minutes going towards Plumlee and 22 minutes going to Isaiah Stewart. One thing that's notable about Plumlee, and one of the reasons that we've seen Stewart get extra minutes, is number one, the Pistons are in a lot of blowouts because they're terrible. So they play in a lot of non-competitive games, and Plumlee isn't the guy who plays garbage time. Stewart is. And then in close games, Plumlee gets into foul trouble all the time. So if we go back 2 games ago against Toronto, 5 personal fouls for him. A game against the Spurs, that was a blowout. Then we go back to some games last week. Hornets, 4 fouls. Then before the All-Star break, Knicks, 5 fouls. Raptors, 4 fouls. So I think that Stewart's going to end up picking up minutes in a lot of games just because there's a lot of blowouts and there's a lot of games where Plumlee gets into foul trouble. So if we look at the price point on Isaiah Stewart on FanDuel, I do think that it makes him one of those guys who is a viable cheap option just because of there aren't very many good cheap plays on the slate. And he's somebody who I think we expect over 20 minutes from. And he's a relatively decent points per minute fantasy producer. So he's not a priority play, but he's somebody who I've projected to score right around 24 fantasy points, which isn't a terrible outcome for this slate.
All right. I'm just seeing something. People want to get some free subscriptions here. I've got a way for you. Check out the pin tweet at Awesemo_COM. Let me put this down there. We're giving away 5 one-week subscriptions. There are only 25 people that are entered into this contest right now. Relatively simple. Follow what is the instructions on the pin tweet, but ultimately what you're doing is listing the name of a team that wins today in March Madness. Hint, hint, pick one that already won. And then you're going to be in a random drawing if you follow everything else on that tweet. There's an easy way. Right now, you got a 1 in 5 chance of getting a 1 full week of Awesemo premium content that gives you the keys to the kingdom. You literally get everything, including Slack, all sorts of projections, 15 different kinds of DFS content, and much, much more. The Chicago side here, what did you make of them shaking up their starting lineup? Do you think that continues to stick? Is that a driving factor? Why would they want to devalue Kobe White so much? So many questions here in the Windy City.
All right. So, I mean, in terms of whether they're going to stick with the starting lineup, I haven't seen if they put out an official starting lineup yet, but Satoransky's now started, how many games in a row has it been? He's started 4 games in a row. So he started every game since March 12th. So, I mean, it's basically ever since the All-Star break, they've gone with Satoransky as the starter. I don't see a reason for that to change. And his minutes have actually even gone up in recent games. So last 2 games, 31, 34 minutes for Satoransky. 34 minutes, I think, is a little bit too high to expect from him. But I mean, even if we go conservative on the minutes and give him 30, that still has him somebody who I project for right around 25 fantasy points. And I think that makes him somebody that we want to get to on this slate. On DraftKings, he is priced at, what was the exact price point for Satoransky?
Sorry, I was
4,500 for Satoransky. At the projection I have for him right now, I have him in 35% of my DraftKings lineups. That will maybe go down a little bit if Ben Simmons is out. And then there's guys like Shake Milton. And
Ben Simmons is available.
Okay, so that's not going to change because Ben Simmons is available. Let's see, any other? Oh, here we have other news here that came out at the same time. Mitchell Robinson is likely to play, and Emmanuel Quickley and Elfrid Payton are both game time decisions. So we're probably not going to know about that. Game starts at 8:00, right?
Yes.
Yeah, 8:00 Eastern time. So yeah, we're probably not going to know about that for another hour or so. But yeah, I mean, if those guys are out, then like Alec Burks opens up as a value play. That would bring down Satoransky a little bit. But as of right now, Satoransky is probably the strongest cheap point guard option on the slate. He's the one I have the most exposure to personally. So I hope he ends up being the strongest cheap play on the slate as far as point guards go. So yeah, Satoransky, I definitely think is worth getting to against the Pistons because I don't see any reason that his role would change at this point.
So did you quickly go make a bet on the Sixers now that we have that news?
No, I was talking and
I'm trying to, but DK says they can't find me. I'm channeling you. You're the one that says we have about 90 seconds to react to news like this. And I don't think I'm going to get there.
Sometimes it's hard when I'm doing a show though, but or else that would have been a priority for me.
Sixers by 1.5 now.
I think the Knicks were favored by 1.5 before.
They were. So we missed our little moment there. I'm still going to bet it anyway there. All right. Oddshopper.awesemo.com. Check that out. It was where you can find all of the it says my bet wasn't placed because they changed the odds again. That's where you can find all of the odds. Why are we shopping odds? Well, what we're doing is we're comparing all of the major sports books that are available out there, looking at their odds and then the juice or vigorish or what we are paying to place those wagers. They will goose the lines on one side or the other. If you are not doing math in your head quickly, which most people are not, you're missing out. OddsShopper does all of that for you, tells you where the best bet is for what you want to do. Definitely check that out there for the good stuff. But yes, we have all the main ones. We don't mention names.
Yeah, there we go. You read my message.
I said all the major ones the first time. I wasn't going to go there, but I wanted you to know that I read your message. And I know that, yes, we're not allowed to say certain things. YouTube they're always listening.
They know everything. It's the goofy algorithm. They know what's up. By the way, we also got a super chat here that I think we should bring up here from Thomas McEwen. He wants to know, is Harden, Beal, and Doncic too top heavy for DK? I mean, I like all those guys individually, but what's the opportunity cost there? Like, there isn't a whole lot of value plays that are open. So, like, Harden's my favorite pay up option. I have exposure to Luka and I have exposure to Beal. Those are actually overall my 3 favorite pay up options, but I don't have any lineups as of right now. I'm just going to double check to make sure that's the case. I'm just going to sort.
So you said Harden, Beal, and Doncic. So if we put those 3 in, we have $3,700 for each player after that.
So like, I think all of them individually are good plays, but I don't think unless something crazy happens where somebody unexpected gets ruled out, I don't think there's enough value to fit all 3 of them in one lineup together.
You would need, we can do it if we add in Gary Matthews. You'd probably need a Cam Johnson to play. You're going to roll the dice with Abdul Nader. Stanley Johnson's out of the mix because everybody's back. You could probably go with the Denny Abdia. Dorian Finney-Smith is back. Yeah, it's going to be kind of tough. You'd be looking at Matthews and Alex Len. I don't feel great about those guys, but that would be the way you end up doing it. That feels a little bit much because on the season, Matthews is averaging just under 12 DK points per game and Len just under 14. That's not good.
All right. We've got our friend Gene Kim also asking super chat here. Greg, why am I locking Boucher in tonight? It seems like a better question for you than it is for me. I don't know why you're locking Chris Boucher tonight. Chris Boucher, I mean, there's always upside in rostering Boucher, but I mean, that's a really crazy amount of embracing variance there. Because we look at Chris Boucher, now that we have Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby all back and playing full minutes, we only saw 20 minutes out of Boucher last game. And it's not to say he can't play more, but there's an insane amount of risk going that heavy on Boucher just because his playing time is all over the place. Like sometimes Chris Boucher will play 28 minutes and then with no rhyme or reason, he'll play 12 minutes the next game. So while I do think there's upside in rostering him in GPPs, I have a slight amount of exposure to him. I think you're opening yourself up to just a ridiculous amount of risk by going all in on him.
Speaking of going all in, we got about 2,000 people watching. Let's get to 450 likes. That means 1 out of 10 of you needs to hit that like button if you want to get money time tonight. No likey, no money time. It's that simple. So we got a little sidetracked here. Moving back to Chicago. Anything else you want to mention there? I kind of like Thaddeus Young just a little bit for his versatility. And now that Simmons is in, we're not seeing, and we'll get to the Lakers, but they're not great value either. It's starting to feel like we want to look at some of those other options that they're not punt plays. They're more, now we're really going to start focusing on a point per dollar. We may be left with just going towards 2 studs in most of our lineups here, particularly on DraftKings. Anybody on the Bulls stand out meeting that particular criteria? Or do you think Zach is one of the studs?
No, because there's too many other guys that I'm prioritizing paying up for over him. Like I mentioned before, I mean, I really like Bradley Beal on this slate. I like James Harden. I like Luka Doncic. Already it's a slate where we don't have that much value, so I can't just roster all these guys, and he's not really making the cut for me in terms of my priorities. I have a little bit of exposure to Lauri Markkanen. Like I said, Satoransky's right now my favorite cheaper point guard option. But beyond him, there's not really a whole lot to like. Wendell Carter Jr., he's been playing behind Thaddeus Young in the rotation. Kobe White, like we talked about before, with Satoransky getting more minutes, those are directly coming from Kobe White. And they just have a somewhat deep rotation of guys that they're playing, you know, like 26 to 25 minutes. So guys like Kobe White, Otto Porter, Patrick Williams, Wendell Carter Jr., Denzel Valentine. It's just a kind of hodgepodge of guys who don't look good at all projection-wise. So I think this is one of the weaker games to target, or weaker teams to target, even though the Bulls have what should be a pretty favorable matchup against the Pistons.
All right. Did you know that this will be the second day that I can remember this season, that all 3 Porter
It does not surprise me that you only remember 2 games.
That all three Porter Juniors are playing. So they all played on Friday night here. It looks like they're all slated to play today. 2 of the 3 have played. We're still waiting on Otto Porter Jr. That's kind of interesting, though.
Yeah, well, there's no narrative to play all 3 of them together because Kevin Porter Jr. already played poorly earlier today. So no way to jam all 3 of them in together.
No, but this is interesting. I thought there was a rule that all 3 of them could never be healthy at the same time. All right. I heard that when you get old, you can't remember things. That's from Eric Johnson. I'm living proof here. Some people think that I remind them of a venerable turtle, you know, one that's like about 179 years old. Yes, one of those.
Yeah, like the guy from Rat Race.
Did you know the first year I played fantasy basketball was 1989? So that means I've played fantasy basketball in the 80s, the 90s, the aughts, the 10s, and now the 2020s. 5 decades. Mini Minosa here. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I started playing in the 90s, so that's not that crazy.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I'm only 1 behind you, and I'm like half your age. So that's not that wild.
All right. We'll see. We'll see who lasts longer. There you go.
At the rate I'm going, it'll probably be you.
All right. Oh, I like this. EMac locked and loaded. Tony Kukoc for takedowns. Yeah, that's long. Damn, you're oldest. Old AF? What's AF?
You know what I just want to see you.
You want to see me do GFY. Good for you. Right?
Yeah. Well,
is it shake my head, scratch my head? I don't know what it is.
You're like even behind AIM chat, like AOL.
I didn't have that.
I know that was after, like AOL Instant Messenger was after your time.
Yes. It's a shame. All right, back to the task at hand here. That is our first 3 games. Somewhere Tom is watching and not shaking his head right now. He is ready to send me a note to say, quit screwing around, EMac. Philadelphia and New York. So we know that pretty much everybody's going to be healthy. I still like Tobias Harris in this one, and not just because of what he did last night. Now 4 of his 7 best fantasy performances have come without Joel Embiid. In 2, if not 3 of those, they were without Embiid and Simmons, but he does see a nice uptick. He 30 minutes and he almost got a triple-double last night. Of course, he's not going to nail 12 of 18 shots tonight, but I like him. I'm okay with Simmons. Do you go with a Tony Bradley or a Dwight Howard? Is there anybody else from Philadelphia that you would consider when we remember that Tom Thibodeau has the Knicks allowing 108 points per 100 possessions, which is a top 3 figure in the league, and they are playing at about 96 possessions per 48 minutes, which is the lowest in the league.
Yeah, the Knicks are brutal to target for fantasy. I mean, the total for this game, 213, which, I mean, normally Knicks games have by far the lowest total on slates. We have so many slow-paced teams playing tonight that, I mean, listen to some of these totals. And we've talked about most of these games already, but Toronto-Cleveland, 216.5. Chicago-Detroit, 217.5. And we've got Philly and the Knicks, 213. And then Lakers-Phoenix, 214.5. So we've got Dallas-Portland is fairly high-paced. And then Washington-Brooklyn, obviously, we talked about that game, 248 total, way faster pace than all the other games on the slate. But we can't even give this game the usual ding for Knicks games. It's like, oh, this game's going to be so slow-paced, because all of them are going to be slow-paced. Yeah. So if we say that we don't want to rush this game because of the pace, then we're taking out 75% of the games on the slate. So that's not really something that we could do. Or 67% is 4 out of 6. I was thinking 6 out of 8 off the top of my head, but yeah, you get the point. There's a bunch of slow-paced games on the slate, so it can't be all that much of a concern. But here is what is the concern for me. Now that Joel Embiid is out, we've seen the pricing kind of adjust fairly for the Sixers players. And then the other thing to consider also is that Tobias Harris is super expensive, especially after Ben Simmons was out yesterday and was questionable to play today. So now we've got Tobias Harris priced all the way up to where is he at on FanDuel? I think it's close to the highest we've seen him on FanDuel so far this year, 8,300. And his apex price is 8,300. And then on DraftKings,
he's 86 and he's 38 on Yahoo.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, those are just really steep price tags to play for Tobias Harris with Ben Simmons in. If Ben Simmons was out, then I think I would have had to have gotten to Tobias Harris. That's not the case now. And then the other thing also, if you look at him on FanDuel in terms of his projected ownership, he's still expected to be fairly popular, right around 20%. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who are locked into Tobias Harris earlier in the day thinking that Ben Simmons probably wasn't going to play and aren't going to be making those adjustments there. So Tobias Harris, somebody I'm underweight to the field on FanDuel. Don't have him in my player pool on DraftKings. To me, the price tag is just a little bit too steep for this matchup.
Okay. I think of the Knicks, well, how many minutes do you think Mitchell Robinson is going to play?
I assume that it's going to be a time share between Robinson.
I was just looking it up. Alex has him for 21 minutes.
Thibodeau has already said that Mitchell Robinson is going to start at some point going forward, but he's going to bring him back slowly. And that he's going to keep it as a timeshare for now, because he said he likes what he's seen from Nerlens Noel so far. He said that he wants to keep Taj Gibson in the rotation because he thinks Gibson is giving them good minutes. So what happens as a result of this is that none of these guys are viable plays, in my opinion. Mitchell Robinson is going to play enough to have much upside. Nerlens Noel is definitely going to take a cut in playing time, and that hurts him. And Taj Gibson wasn't really viable to begin with. So none of those 3 guys are players that I want to get to. But we're still waiting on that news with Emmanuel Quickley and Elfrid Payton. Both of them are questionable to play. So that's really where we can see a lot of value open up on the slate. And it's something that's going to be a really good late swap opportunity. If these guys get ruled out, I think that Alec Burks becomes a really strong play then. But once again, with both of them questionable and being game time decisions, the game doesn't lock for an hour and 27 minutes. It's hard to speculate for sure those guys are going to be in or out.
All right, reminder, guys, we do have the March Madness package that is available separately. It is $29.95. You get it for the entire tournament all the way through. the Final Four and the national title game. There is DFS contest galore. We got another 8 games tomorrow, and then we are running it back all next weekend. This is the most fun time of the year. We've been 2 years without the tournament, where it's been a 2-year gap, I should say. We missed it last year due to the pandemic, so it's been a lot of fun. All sorts of betting content, DFS content. That package also gets you access to the Slack channel, or all of Slack, and there's a channel there with sports betting as well as college basketball, where Ben Rasa and Matt Gajewski are holding court. A lot of fun to go tail some of their bets. I've been enjoying that thus far. Definitely check that out. $29.95 for that one. We need 100 more likes to get us to money time. You guys need to do that. We are now 25 minutes away from lock. Let's move on to our next game here, Greg. Where did my run sheet go? We are looking at
Lakers and Suns. It's either
there
Lakers
we
and
go.
Suns
No,
or
it's
Dallas
like,
and Portland.
Yeah, I was thinking that there was 3 games after the Philadelphia one, but there's not, because there's 3 at 7 o'clock. So Lakers at Phoenix. Phoenix, last I looked, was a 10-point favorite. It's 214 over under here, which projects the Lakers to score about 102 points or so. LeBron James out with the high ankle sprain indefinitely. Anthony Davis weeks away with his calf strain. Marc Gasol questionable. He is in the health and safety protocol. On the other side, Phoenix relatively healthy. They may get the return of Cameron Johnson tonight out of the health and safety protocol. And then they acquired Torrey Craig in a trade with Milwaukee, and he has not yet debuted for them. They're not sure when they're going to play him. That's just looking for another defender utility piece, as all of a sudden they're going to be in the playoffs. What do we want to talk about with the Lakers? So you kind of hit at the top, Greg, where we have Davis has been out for long enough that's been accounted for. We have LeBron out, which has basically been a triple-double. So let's just call that 50 fantasy points, maybe, I don't know, close to 20 shots, et cetera. It's going to kind of be a little to you, a little to you, a little to you. I don't think there's one direct beneficiary here. They lose their best ball handler. So now we are down to Schroeder. You're down to Alex Caruso. I almost say Awesemo, but it's Alex Caruso. And then you got Talen Horton-Tucker, who is kind of the third option. I'm okay with those guys. I'm okay with their forwards. I don't want any part of the front court other than Harrell, who I still think of as a forward. And then the late slate, I'm good with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I still can't get to Wesley Matthews and his 0.3 fantasy points per minute without Davis and LeBron on the court in 40 some minutes. I still can't get there for him. Break this down, because none of these guys are, I want that guy on my team. I would be shocked if I build a lineup that doesn't have a Laker on it, but I don't know which one is the air quote best one for tonight.
Yeah, I think it's Talen Horton-Tucker. And I mean, to me, by far, Talen Horton-Tucker is easily my favorite Laker player to roster. If you look at the on-off court numbers for Lakers this year, Talen Horton-Tucker gets the biggest usage bump. He has a 5.9% usage increase when both LeBron James and Anthony Davis are off the court. In addition to that, I think he also stands to gain more minutes than anybody else on the team now that LeBron James is out. I think there's going to be a hodgepodge of other guys they're just going to throw out there and see what happens, right? I think Markieff Morris is going to get some more minutes than usual. Alex Caruso, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Wesley Matthews. I think even Kostas Antetokounmpo could end up in the rotation and play 8 minutes or something like that. But Talen Horton-Tucker, I do expect him to start. I expect him to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 minutes. And something else that's kind of nice about THT in this matchup is the Lakers are the biggest underdogs on the slate. They are double-digit underdogs playing against Phoenix. And I think no matter what the score of the game is in the fourth quarter, I think THT is going to be out there. So if the Lakers are up by 5 points, I think Talen Horton-Tucker is closing. If the Lakers are getting their faces kicked in and they're down by 30 points in the fourth quarter, I think Talen Horton-Tucker is playing garbage time. So I think that's something else that's kind of nice to like about him as a value play. You could even argue that the Lakers getting blown out is the best possible situation for Talen Horton-Tucker's value, just because instead of going up against a really tough Suns defense, he could be playing the fourth quarter against backup. So Talen Horton-Tucker on a slate that's really lacking value, he is the player that I'm going to have the most exposure to of anybody on the slate.
Before we get to Phoenix, we have a super chat here. Are we still in on Shake Milton? And for cheap on DK, is Satoransky a lock?
So comparing those two guys, I actually think it's relevant here because As far as cheaper point guards go, Satoransky and Milton are in the same price range. I have a preference towards Satoransky. I have some exposure to Milton, but it's not a significant amount. He would have been obviously a very strong play if Simmons was not playing. With Simmons in, I think Milton probably comes off the bench, probably plays somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 minutes. That's enough to make him viable on the slate, but just somebody who I'm going to be getting to in like 5 to 10% of my lineups.
All right. Only 407 likes. We're not getting to money time, folks. Sorry. Them's the rules. Them's the rules. You got to get another 43 here.
Well, EMac is strict when it comes to giving away information.
We definitely are. But if you fill in the other spot there in the Fred Main Elite Fan Club, there's one left. And you get us to money time. Not only that, it'll be team free money because I'll put in some head-to-heads on the DK lobby. I haven't built my lineups yet, and we're cruising towards lock rather quickly here. They asked me if I remember the show China Beach. Why, yes. Yes, I do. Dana Delaney, very good-looking woman. And the song Reflections by Diana Ross and Supremes. That was the opening theme song there. So I believe Diana Ross and Supremes Reflection was 1967 or 68. Came out of the Motown label, of course. That was before I was born, though. Just saying. Barely, but it was. All right. Do you see a surprise? Chris Paul, why don't you take the night off in our cards? It is Sunday. Weird stuff happens. We haven't got the other shoe dropping just yet. Greg, take us through Chris Paul and the rest of the Suns.
Yeah, so I think as far as the Suns go, it's hard to gauge how difficult or easy of a matchup this is against the Lakers with basically everybody out for them. But with no LeBron and Anthony Davis, I'm going to assume this is probably a much easier matchup than we would normally think going up against the Lakers. So I'm getting some exposure to both Chris Paul and Devin Booker. And I typically don't like to roster these guys when both of them are healthy because I've talked about this a lot this year, that they cannibalize each other. And we've seen the upside capped for both these guys. In terms of them resting, though, either of them, obviously you mentioned Chris Paul there. Of the two, I think he would be more likely to rest. But still, this is a really important game for the Suns in playoff standings. So right now, the NBA standings, the Suns and the Lakers are currently tied for the lead in the Pacific Division. And the other thing also is the Suns are also in contention to get the number 1 overall seed in the Western Conference, only 2.5 games behind the Jazz at this point. So I don't think this is a game that we're going to see Chris Paul sit out. I think even though the Lakers are banged up and the Suns are big favorites, I still think this is a game that the Suns are definitely going to be pushing to win. The other thing to consider, too, is they just had a game where they were massive favorites against the Timberwolves a few days ago that they end up losing at home. So I think they're going to be taking this game against the Lakers pretty seriously. I don't expect any sort of rest from Chris Paul.
Okay, and that was sort of where I landed on that assessment as well. But I thought I would ask the expert. We did get to money time. We're going to break down this last game. I'm going to see if we get one more update here for ownership. I will get that. If you guys go into the DK lobby, you will see EMac head-to-heads in the $1 section. Enjoy those. You have Dallas at Portland, reprisal of Friday night's game. Portland is 2-point home dogs, 228 over under here. Willie Cauley-Stein and James Johnson are still in the health and safety protocol. Dorian Finney-Smith was out for personal reasons, but he is available to play tonight. Yusuf Nurkic out for 2 more weeks. We have CJ McCollum. This will be his 4th game back. He did play on a back-to-back. In his 3 games, he's played 26, 21, and then 28 minutes in that last one on Friday, which was coming on the back-to-back. Jacked up 23 shots. What do we see here? The other thing that I learned is how to read rotational box scores working with Adam. I know that is something you use all the time. So the key thing about this, the staggering of the minutes. Since McCollum has returned, he gets generally 5 to 6 minutes at the beginning of the second quarter without Lillard, and then 2 to 3 at the beginning of the fourth quarter without Lillard. That allows him to maintain what has been almost a 30% usage rate, albeit in limited minutes. What do you want to do with this team, this game, this everything?
All right. So this everything. Let's start with the Portland side because you were already talking about the minutes there with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. Given all of the strong pay-up options we have on the slate, I can't prioritize Damian Lillard, and I haven't been for the last few slates. And I think that going forward, now that CJ McCollum is starting to see his minutes ramped up, I don't think we're going to see 35 minutes out of McCollum. I still think he's a little bit limited, which does a couple of things. Number one, that means that McCollum isn't a viable play for me because he's still fairly expensive. But he's going to play enough that I think he has to take away some shots and playmaking responsibilities from Damian Lillard. So, I mean, one thing that really stuck out to me was a couple of games ago, we saw Damian Lillard have a game with 0 assists and 7 turnovers against the Pelicans. That was a really extreme example of playmaking duties where he got to 0 assists. But still, I think it's an indication that CJ McCollum being there is going to take away playmaking duties from Damian Lillard. There's no situation in a game where McCollum is out that Damian Lillard winds up with 0 assists. So even though he scored 36 real life points, he had a fairly crappy fantasy game because the assists weren't there for him. And then last game, his usage rate went down to 30%. It's still a significant usage rate. However, for the season, he has a 33% usage rate. So we're looking at slightly less shots going to Damian Lillard. We're looking at slightly less playmaking duties. So we're comparing him to all these other stars that are on the slate, like James Harden in a game with now been bet up to a 249 total. The Nets game is up to. I can't prioritize Damian Lillard over somebody like James Harden. I can't prioritize Damian Lillard over somebody like Luka Doncic on the other side of the game because he has such a bigger role for Dallas right now than Lillard has for the Blazers. So until Dame starts to get less expensive with CJ McCollum now back in the mix, I'm not going to be getting to Damian Lillard.
All right. Before we get to Dallas here, I'm dropping in the.
Did EMac freeze?
Am I still here? No. Yes, maybe. I'm good. I'm dropping in the free No House Advantage projections. We also have free optimal lineups page for them. Dropping that in. That's over at No House Advantage. It's too hard to make lineups there. Props got you confused. Utilize all the heavy lifting that Alex Baker's model has already done for you. Sign up with the promo code Awesemo when you make your first deposit. They will match you up to $20 in your deposit match. We're going to talk. We just got a hot off the press ownership here. Greg, take us through the Kristaps Porzingis Luka Doncic show. Is there anybody else, and why is Josh Richardson a trap tonight?
I mean, is he a trap? Like, are people? It's not like he has some crazy ownership or anything.
Did he finally come back down? He is. Oh, good. He's back down to 15. No, he was up to close to 25 earlier today.
Okay, yeah. Like I don't that like that's not a number that stands out to me. I think that Richardson for his price, it's just a fair price point to me. I have less than 15% exposure to him. If you rostered him, I wouldn't say you're crazy, but at the same time too, like if he's in like 30% of your lineups, then I would question what it is that anyone would think makes him a crazy play. Like I think that's just a really fair price. And it's a price range that I'm not really looking to get to all that much on this slate. Like I said, I'm prioritizing some of those stars and some of these crappy value plays and hoping that the stars score enough fantasy points where it's going to offset what's probably not going to be massive games from guys like Alex Len or Taylor Horton Tucker. Like if I could get just somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 fantasy points out of those guys, I think that is enough to be optimal for this slate. And I think it's the way you want to go about building your cash game lineups, just because the ceiling is so high for somebody like a James Harden in a matchup against Washington with a nearly 250 point total. Now getting to Luka, I think we have to compare him to James Harden because that's probably a decision, particularly on DraftKings, that a lot of people will have to make. And I think that Harden is a higher priority play than Luka. But with that said, I think that Luka, if you're paying up for somebody, he's the number 2 guy that I'd want to get to in terms of a pay up option. Porzingis, to me, not somebody that's all that interesting on DraftKings. On FanDuel, due to positionality and the fact that he's a slightly better FanDuel performer than DraftKings performer, just because of the defensive stats, that and his price is down a little bit on FanDuel at 7,700. I think that he is a priority at power forward on FanDuel, but not somebody I'm looking at on DraftKings.
All right, here is the ownership for you guys. My head-to-heads are out there in the DK lobby. EMac, they're $1. Enjoy. James Harden on DraftKings, 36. Taylor Horton Tucker, 27. Colin Sexton, 23. Montrezl Harrell, 22. Kristaps Porzingis, 22. Bradley Beal, 22. Luka Doncic, 21. Over on FanDuel, Harden leads the way once again, 43. Kyrie Irving, 34. Bradley Beal, 33. Luka Doncic, 33. Jarrett Allen, 31. Larry Nance Jr., the Greg Ehrenberg special, is 27. And on Yahoo, Kyrie Irving, 39. Taylor Horton Tucker, 39. Kyle Kuzma, 38. Dennis Schroeder, 37. Montrezl Harrell, 35, and James Harden, 30. None of these are surprising to us, are they?
No, not really. I think all those numbers make sense. There's not, like, if you were to say to me that Josh Richardson, like you alluded to before, was the most popular player on the slate, like, well, that's weird. But no, those guys all make sense.
All right. Let's see here. What player are you terrified of not having enough of tonight?
Terrified of not having enough of. Well, I just kind of poo-pooed on Damian Lillard, and he always has upside. So, like,
time.
Yeah, like if Damian Lillard goes out and scores, if Damian Lillard gets hot and scores, 50 points, like he did the other night, I didn't roster him, ends up with 75 fantasy points. I wouldn't feel great about that. But and with that said, I haven't been on Damian Lillard any of the last 3 games, and he's been at least somewhat popular in all of them. And he had 1 really good game and then 2 relatively terrible games for fantasy. So, obviously, I'm afraid of not having somebody like Damian Lillard due to his upside, but I still feel pretty comfortable with the choices I'm making.
$2 super chat here from Zach Rush. Thank you. Sadiq Bey or Lauri Markkanen on DK?
Let's see. Who do I have a higher projection for? Lauri Markkanen.
Bradley or Len, DK GPP. That is from Mr. Moneybags. I am obligated under the Chris Spags statute of money time to answer a question from Mr. Moneybags when we're doing money time. Do you like, oh no, I lost the question. Was it?
You said Alex Len or Tony Bradley.
Yeah.
So assuming that is Tony Bradley. I'm higher on Alex Len for this slate. I have an uncomfortable amount of exposure to Alex Len, so I hope some other value play opens up so I can get to less of Alex Len. But as of now, Alex Len is going to be, looks like my second most popular value play behind Taylor Horton-Tucker.
All right. Adam Klug asks, says, good luck to everybody. I'll ask the $64,000 question. EMac, what is the first DFS lineup you remember creating? It would have been baseball, FanDuel, I think spring of 2011 is when I first found DFS. And when I found it, I thought, how is this legal? Then I thought, where have you been all my life? And then I thought it was a money laundering operation because I couldn't understand how it worked. And that was when they used to post leaderboards of people's winnings on the sites, Draft Street in particular. And I couldn't figure out what it was, but I've been loving every minute of it since. First NFL player I ever drafted, I believe, was Jerry Rice, like 1995, the year he hurt his knee. I also had Jeff Blake, hoping he would recapture the magic when he was with the Bengals. Spoiler alert, he didn't recapture the magic of his one good season. Let's see here. Stewart or Len on DK?
Len. I've been answering some of the questions in the YouTube chat as we go along. But
thank you.
Yep. Alex Len for me.
All right, I'm going to upload some of my lineups. Who is your best play under 4K not named Alex Len?
Taylor Horton-Tucker.
Oh, okay. What is your percentage on Taylor Horton-Tucker?
Let's see. He is in about across FanDuel and DraftKings. Looks like about 65% of my lineups. And he is. He's 42. What was the price threshold?
4,000 or less.
All right, so he's over 4,000. So who would it be after that? Isaac Okoro.
Oof. That's an involuntary response to the name Isaac Okoro. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. There's a bunch of guys who are cheap that I don't think have massive upsides, but I'm not betting on their upside. What I'm really banking on is the upside of the players that it's letting me get to. So you hope it's not a situation like the other day where James Harden was like, like people rostered. It was something that I talked about with Adam on Twitter where we were making fun of Nico Mannion not playing minutes. He's like, but it's okay because Nico Mannion gave me the salary savings to be able to get up to James Harden his 40 fantasy points. So, but you hope the opposite of the situation where it's like, hey, even if some of these guys don't have the best games, if James Harden just scores a gazillion fantasy points, then it doesn't matter because you need him anyway.
All right, another super chat coming in here from Avi Schrar. I apologize for messing up that name. He says Porter, Cam, or Thybulle on FanDuel. That would be Otto Porter Jr. I'm assuming Cam Johnson and Matisse Thybulle.
Matisse Thybulle for me, especially because this is FanDuel. So Thybulle is one of these weird players for cheap who doesn't really have all that much upside on DraftKings. Why he does on FanDuel is because he has these weird lines sometimes. He's one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. And there are some games he puts up where he'll score like 3 points, but then pull down like 6 rebounds and have like 4 steals and 2 blocks. And those lines don't really mean all that much for DraftKings, but on FanDuel where the defensive stats are worth 3 each, there's been some games where Matisse Thybulle has broken slates for cheap just based on defensive stats. So I do like him on FanDuel.
This is for a friend of the program. I've had the pleasure of doing shows with him in the past. Cedric Phillips, super chat. Thank you for pointing out that I missed it. Otherwise, I would have missed it, Cedric. He says he would like to know your top 3 centers on FanDuel for tournaments.
So the centers I have the most exposure to are Jared Allen, Enes Kanter, and Alex Len on FanDuel.
Another super chat. Wow, coming in. Soul Dope 1234 says, "Happy Sunday for FanDuel. Would you like it's a 3v3, Allen, Markieff, and Bradley, or Len, Grant, and JaVale McGee?"
All right, so I want.
So Jared Allen is who it is.
Yeah. I want absolutely nothing to do with JaVale McGee on this slate coming back from illness. I don't think he plays all that many minutes. The other thing also is JaVale McGee, who was already kind of getting pinched in the rotation earlier in the year, wasn't playing a ton of minutes. Now we also have Larry Nance in the mix. So it's hard to expect a bunch of minutes from JaVale McGee. So the Allen, Markieff Morris, and Tony Bradley side is a little stronger.
All right. Can I ask you to answer and ask a few questions? I got to do some uploading here. Top 3 small forwards on FanDuel is the first one to start you off. I'm assuming your lineups are locked and loaded.
I am all good to go. All right.
Okay. Because I don't have nearly as much in play as you do, but I don't want to lose $200 either. So
my favorite small forward options on FanDuel are Larry Nance Jr., Rui Hachimura, and Sadiq Bey. If you want to go with somebody contrarian, and he's somebody who I think applies to on both FanDuel and DraftKings, OG Anunoby is a little bit cheaper than normally see him. He's still priced in the low 5K range. Normally when he's totally healthy, he's right around 6,000. And he was coming back from COVID a little slow, but he played 34 minutes last game against the Jazz. So I assume that OG Anunoby is fully ready to go. So I think that he is a good contrarian option on FanDuel and DK. Although it's probably actually his ownership has come up a little bit on FanDuel, but still is lower on DK. But either way, I think Anunoby is somebody else to consider.
All right. You want to roll with a few more there while I try to upload this?
Yeah. So John in the YouTube chat asked, Greg, you don't have Joe Harris. I mentioned Joe Harris before as somebody I have exposure to, and he is my 5th most exposed small forward. Assuming that this is a FanDuel question, DraftKings, I don't have exposure to Joe Harris. But on FanDuel, I have him behind Larry Nance, Sadiq Bey, Hachimura, OG Anunoby, and then Harris is next. So those are the 5 small forwards that I have the most exposure to. So he's in there. Schroeder or Garland. This depends on which site. So Dennis Schroeder, I think, is too expensive on DraftKings at 6,900. But on FanDuel at 6,100, I think he's one of the stronger point guard options. So it's site dependent. If it's FanDuel, then the answer is Schroeder. If it's DK, I lean towards Darius Garland. Let's see. We haven't checked the Slack at all. I've just been reading off the YouTube chats to see who we were added at here. Porzingis and Larry Nance. This is from It's Really Me Lane in our Slack chat. Porzingis and Larry Nance, or well, this is a lot of combinations of players. It's always hard for me to read the names of the players when there's a bunch of them being combined and then try to figure out which combination is best. So let me try to figure this out in my head. Porzingis and Larry Nance, or Luka and Siakam / Jeremy Grant in the DK cash / DK single entry. All right. So Porzingis and Larry Nance, or Luka. Wait, so I don't even understand how the salaries work in this. Like, Luka and Siakam cost so much more salary than Porzingis and Larry Nance. So I feel like I'm missing something. I'm reading this wrong. So It's Really Me Lane. DM me, or just read that out more clear, because I'm a little confused by the question. That really went nowhere. I'm reading the question, just don't understand.
How many Alex Len lineups or what was your Alex Len percentage?
What do I have Alex Len? He's in like half my lineups.
Oh my. Okay.
Harden and Kuzma from Fantasy Wiz. Harden and Kuzma, or Siakam and Beal on FanDuel. On FanDuel, I lean towards Harden and Kuzma. How's your lineup? How's your oh, by the way, we got Knicks update here from a minute ago. Emmanuel Quickley and Mitchell Robinson will play. Elfrid Payton, strained hamstring, is out tonight. So going to have to update the Knicks. I'm not going to have time to do that in 2 minutes anyway, because, I mean, we just got that news now. So not a big deal, though. We could wait. The Knicks game doesn't lock until 8 o'clock. So I'm going to make adjustments after that. Really quick, I could hit on the significance of these guys being out. So for the New York Knicks, Emmanuel Quickley, I assume, is going to start. And his price point on DraftKings, 6,000. I think that's pretty fair. The other thing also, this is a really tough matchup for Quickley individually going up against Ben Simmons. This is a matchup that he struggled in just a few days ago, but on FanDuel at 5,100, I think that's a much more appealing price point on Emmanuel Quickley. As long as he starts, 5,100 for him as a starter this year. He has made 2 starts, and he scored 26 fantasy points against the Nets and then 21 against the Sixers. His usage was pretty significant in both of those starts. So assuming Quickley starts, I think he's somebody to go to. Alec Burks is also somebody to roster now that Elfrid Payton is confirmed out. And then also we have to remember that Derrick Rose remains out because he is in the COVID protocol. How's your lineup updating going there, buddy?
I think it worked. I can't tell. I'm sad. The number of my lineups and the number that went into DK don't match. I think that's a bad sign.
Yeah, that's usually a not optimal sign. I mean, we're at lock anyway, so what can you do about it?
Suboptimal, I believe, is what they say. Yeah, that was a rough one there. It kind of got away from me. Very sad. So for those of you that have a cash game lineup, enjoy. So let me just make sure I don't have any people that were locked. Ooh, a lot of people were locked. All right, well, you know what? That'll work. We'll deal with. Oh no. Oh boy. All right. I've got some messes to clean up. I figured out what I did. I grabbed the wrong time, so it loaded with all zeros for the player IDs.
I don't know how you run into these issues.
It's
Is
poor
it me?
planning.
Is it me? I think it's me.
It's poor planning. Are you frozen or am I frozen? Nobody's frozen.
I don't think anybody's frozen.
Just Elsa.
Yeah,
Just
we're at lock though, so
we're at lock. I've got a mess. This is going to be fun, but we're doing this all over again tomorrow. Thankfully, not me. Oh wait, I am. I think I'm on the late slate swap and sweat show. We've got all sorts of goodness. We start off again tomorrow at 6:30 in the morning. We've got Josh doing the process show. We of course have the March Madness going on, so we will get a live before lock March Madness extravaganza going off one more time. We've got hockey, we've got golf, we've got multiple NBA shows in the afternoon, and then we have late slate NBA. We've got you covered. We have about 10 hours of programming going on tomorrow. No rest for the wicked. Greg, any final thoughts? Is Monday? Is that the Ewan Kaufman on Monday?
Monday morning. So by the way, that's why also people not only should be liking the videos that EMac and I do together, but also subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the notification bell, because then you can find out when all of these millions of other programs are going to be going live on YouTube.
Absolutely. And shout out to our sponsor, No House Advantage. They, of course, are picking up sponsorship for a lot of our shows now. We do appreciate that. But officially, we've got 11 o'clock is the college basketball live before lock. 2 o'clock is the golf show, first look. 3 o'clock is the NHL strategy show. Also behind the paywall at the same time will be Steve. You know him as the Colts, multi-million-dollar winner on DFS. You can pick his brain. That's behind the paywall. He'll be sharing a screen, answering all sorts of questions on that. 4:30, you got the tip-off with Kayla, Greg, that would be you, and Eric Lindquist. 5:30, we got the NBA Deeper Dive. And then 6:30 to 7:30, we have the NBA Live Before Lock. Good times. We have a 4-game at 9 o'clock late slate, so that will be TBD. Somehow, I'm sure we will be able to work that out so you guys get the maximum content. With that, follow Greg at Greg Ehrenberg. Is there a DFS there?
G Ehrenberg DFS.
G Ehrenberg.
By the way, do you bill them by the dollar, by the minute here? Like you're really stretching the show out.
No, I was trying to figure out what happened to my lineup still as I was talking.
All right.
It's very sad. I just flushed $200, man. I'm sad. That was stupid. It's a cautionary tale of what not to do. You can follow me at EMac DFS. If you want to hear me whine and bitch later, you can join the super chat, or pardon me, the Slack chat. You can follow Awesemo _COM. With that, gamers, I'm going to go shed a tear.
Explain to me what you did. I don't get this.
When I was going into Fantasy Cruncher, I picked the wrong slate. So when it comes out, I picked the afternoon slate. So it said none of these players are on it.